watching today's live cast via the Google Chrome extension instead of your browser, this should only take about a minute to download. It'll definitely provide the best experience. We also would love if you guys could ask questions to our speakers based on whatever they're talking about today. And you can do that through the Q&A widget on WebEx. So also not too late to invite someone if you know anyone who might be interested in the topic, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who are, feel free to forward them today's URL and they can use that to log in. For anyone not available to watch, however, we have an on-demand section on our site with all of our amazing fireside chats, and we'll follow up with that link after today's event. So be sure to share that with anyone you think might be interested. Lastly, if you're looking for a dial-in number, you can definitely just dial in on your cell phone. This will give you a great audio connection. You just won't be able to watch everyone visually. Actually, last thing is we definitely recommend watching today's live cast on grid view so that you can see everyone on the screen. So if you go to the top right of your screen, you should see a button that says layout, and you can switch over to the grid view option. Thanks so much to Cisco WebEx for being the official technology partner of Brand Innovators Virtual Summits and facilitating a great experience for our speakers and our attendees. We would also love to hear what you're saying. So feel free to engage with us on Twitter and LinkedIn and use the hashtag BILivecast so we can see what you're talking about, what questions you have, what you want to see. Feel free to do that during today's event. So we hope you're looking forward to today's live cast. We're going to be hearing from marketing leaders from Jack in the Box, Anheuser-Busch, Campbell's, Roku, Influential, and many more. So really excited to welcome our first speakers of the day. We are joined today by Adrienne Ingle, the Chief Marketing Officer of Jack in the Box. And this session will be moderated by Allison Dietz, a product marketer from Neustar. So really excited to have Adrienne and Allison here today. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So Allison, I'm going to hand it over to you and I will be back at the end. I hope you guys have a great conversation. Oh, Allison, I actually think we aren't able to hear you. It's okay. Classic technical difficulties.
It's the quote of the year. You're on mute.
I know.
If every meeting didn't start that way, we would not know what's going on.
I know.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect. Sorry about that. See you guys.
No worries. All right. Thank you so much for having us. So thank you, Adrienne, for joining us today. I think it's going to be really fun just to hear a little bit more from you and to learn more about, what you've been up to at Jack in the Box. So I thought maybe we could start, if you don't mind, just, doing a little walk down memory lane. And obviously, you've had a very impressive career. And I think a lot of people could learn a lot from, what you've been up to over the last few years. So would you mind just introducing yourself and talk a little bit about your journey to CMO and at Jack in the Box?
Sure. Thanks, Allison, and thanks for having me. It's nice to see you and chat with you again. I am very lucky to work at what I think is one of the most fun brands that you can in the QSR space. I grew up as a fan of Jack in the Box, so I would say my work began then. Those tacos got me through college. And after about 15 years on the advertising agency side of things, I had an opportunity to come into the Jack marketing team, starting in a more traditional marketing communications role, and over the years have taken on some additional interest and responsibility, whether it's diversity and inclusion, digital guest experience, the brand articulation, and even things outside of marketing around our business strategy and what we do from a long-term planning perspective. I really feel like the brand and all businesses are much more effective when all of those things work in synchronicity together. So I enjoy getting to play in a lot of those spaces today. But the core of my focus is still very much brand content, advertising, media strategy.
That's perfect, because that's what we're going to talk about today. But I do think it's interesting to hear a little bit about all these other things that you're up to. And so, feel free to touch on those as we go over the next few minutes and talk through, all of these amazing questions that we have for you. So, I think it'd be nice to, just to pivot a little bit to talk a little bit more about Jack in the Box specifically. You mentioned you're a lifelong fan. Can you talk about the core customer for Jack in the Box? Who is that individual? How do you use media to reach them and engage with them?
Yeah, absolutely. It is really important to know who your customer is, particularly in this changing landscape we all find ourselves in. I would say first and foremost, we want to make sure that the culture of the brand comes through in everything that we do. That's why people love us, and that's how we make human connections with our customers. So while we are absolutely able to identify a very specific, demographic, psychographic sort of approach to our targeting, we have all of sort of the technical stuff in place. It is important for us that we really look at this audience as to how they define themselves. And for Jack in the Box customers, these are people that really want the ability to express themselves. They sort of march to the beat of their own drum. We call them the limitless. They're not self-defined. They don't fit in a box, so don't put them in one. And we want to make sure that, again, as we're sort of looking at them from a demographic perspective, we're also layering on that emotional understanding so that we can have a deeper connection with them.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because you're talking about this very specific sort of mentality, and how do you really go about identifying different media channels and touch points along their journey, and in order to engage with them?
It's a great question. We absolutely base our decision making in data. We have a lot of good data about who comes to our brand, who loves our brand, people that are actually visiting Jack and other QSRs. And so we can use that as a good foundation to then, partner with a great mix of partners and addressable media to determine the right places to reach out to them. We continue to sort of monitor not only our first party data, but how we dovetail into how else people are acting in their lives so that we can choose the best opportunities and the best media plan approaches to connecting with them.
And so that kind of brings me to something that we when we discussed over email what we might talk about. I think it's interesting you talked about this don't put me in a box, this sort of core customer being very unique and an individual. Obviously, that makes it challenging from an innovation standpoint as well, to make sure that you're staying on top of trends and thinking about what could you potentially put in front of those types of consumers to engage with them. Can you talk a little bit about, obviously you had a recent launch this year around your cluck chicken sandwich. Can you talk a little bit about, your communication strategy, your messaging strategy, and how did you bring forward those innovations to engage that customer?
Yeah, I would say in a year of uncertainty, our goal is to first and foremost support our customers in every way imaginable. And that starts with some of the core communications of we're still here, we're still open, we're ready to serve you, and some of the things related to releasing that concern or any barriers that people have to come to us. And then once we get past that, we get to talk about fun things. And you mentioned the cluck sandwich. It's launching officially this week. It's our biggest launch of the year. It's a brand new chicken sandwich, crispy chicken fillet, and we're super excited to bring this upgraded product to our customers. It's a product that not only continues to tell the story of variety that from Jack. You can still get that great burger and some tacos on the side, and now this awesome chicken sandwich too. But we wanted to make sure that as we launch this big product, we're doing it in a way that really dovetails into what people are looking for from us and from brands. And we do that by making sure we're still cognizant of the world people are living in. Many of our customers went back into lockdowns this week. We have many restaurants in California where we're based. We also have a big presence in the Pacific Northwest and Texas. So while some of our markets are seeing different versions of lockdowns, many of them are back at home as of last week. So we're really using the channels that are relevant to them at this time. So focusing on that craveable content, things that they can use digitally to engage with their friends and family if they can't have a real life experience with them. We're leveraging TikTok and mobile a lot with this launch. And because every new chicken sandwich that we launch is important to us, we think that it needs its own new chicken dance. And so we've partnered with Becky G, influencer, to help us bring to light the new product, as well as have a little fun around getting people out, shake your tail feather a bit and have some fun, knowing that consumers are looking for sort of an escape from this world that we're living at, stuck at home, and knowing that their core content needs have changed over the last few months.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially to hear about, the use of new media channels and the use of influencers. I mean, I think it's really interesting to hear how things have changed and the way that in which you're launching this new product. I'm kind of curious. You've touched on a little bit about customer experience and how things have changed significantly because of the pandemic. You touched on a little bit about mobile. Can you maybe partner those two things together? How has your engagement with your customer changed, particularly as it relates to app and mobile in the past year? Because we hear from a lot of other QSRs about the role that app has really played in the last year, and really changed and had to pivot or even accelerate some of the things that you were already considering doing or you were already doing with your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. We have seen an explosion within our digital guest experience, our connections there, especially within our mobile app, but delivery as well, our third-party delivery partnerships. And even within the app, for example, we've seen a 50% increase in downloads on our mobile app, and many of those come from consumers that you would otherwise consider to be later adopters, baby boomers, for example. And I don't think that these habits are going to change. I don't think we're going to go back to the world that we lived in February. I think, it's important for us all to recognize that our relationship with our consumers has changed. They need us to continue to support them through our digital channels, and specific messaging moving forward. And while we have seen that digital has really exploded, at the same time, people are experiencing a little screen fatigue, working from home and sort of being on the computer all the time. We don't even walk between meetings anymore. We just click. So I think it's important for us to continue to highlight other screen-free media, like audio is a great example, and also provide opportunities for people to engage on that human level, because we lose the human connection when we're stuck to the screen every day. And so listening to what our consumers want from us and the data that comes from that, we developed a lot of virtual events, bringing in influencers or customer experiences, giving people a chance to sort of engage. One big one was our prom in a box that we held earlier this year, when at the beginning of the pandemic, many consumers, particularly our high school kids, saw their proms canceled at the last minute. We gave them an opportunity to engage in an online experience and sort of share that important cultural moment of going to prom in this small private chat room, but then share that more broadly across the globe, and actually got a lot of engagement from Brazil randomly. We don't have any restaurants there, but maybe it's a new market for us. But really got a chance to sort of partner with influencers again, Dylan Francis and Diplo, and put on a great show, sent some Jack in the Box food out to these high school kids, supported them with corsages with 1-800-Flowers as a partner and some others. So wherever we can sort of give people a chance to connect on a human level, it's important for us to find ways to do that, even in this crazy world we live in right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's such an unusual, unexpected year. I think, one of the things that we have seen as we look back in early days of the pandemic, we've seen a lot of our clients come to us and say to us, we need to shift our media spend around. We need to support changes to the creatives, like you're talking about, like completely new programs that are relevant to the current customer and the current customer needs. Updating forecasts to think about, what should we expect for the year ahead. Can you maybe speak to some of the unexpected decisions you had to make in those early days, and talk about maybe carrying those forward throughout the rest of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we were one of the first brands to pivot. I'm really proud of how fast we were. It was a little risky, but it paid off, because we not only were able to sort of get ahead of some of the shifts, pulling out of consumer-driven media like drive time radio and outdoor boards, and moving to more digital, mobile, and social spend. But also we saw our partners really have an openness to creative with us. When there weren't sports partnerships anymore and we didn't need all that in-stadium signage we once had, we were able to sort of try some new things. And our sports partners in particular at the Lakers and the Dodgers and the Padres were really great about finding opportunities for our brand to make sense in this new world. And I think, it's important to have those good partnerships. One partnership I'm very proud of is Spotify. They ended up featuring us as a best practice because of how we were able to amend our approach at the beginning of COVID. And I think as we have sort of moved through the rest of this pandemic, to where we are now, it's been important for us to continue to pay attention to what our audience wants. If we know who they are and what they're looking for from us, we're able to start with what matters most to them, and then build out from there. And so, for example, we have really pushed on our esports content. We've had a proud partnership with Team Envy for 4 years and a couple more years left in the contract. And this has really been a great opportunity for us to double down on the gaming and esports space and significantly partner with them in co-branded content, sponsoring the players, the tournaments that they're able to still play, one of the sports that's actually sort of happening still, and find ways to keep our Jack fans entertained. Again, another good partnership actually with Spotify there, where we had really great coverage of a program that we created called Two Truths and a Lie, a fun game to give out some free tacos and engage our audience. So I think finding opportunities to sort of bring people to the brand in the ways that we know that they want to engage, we're listening to them actively to think about how we can continue to do that in the future.
So there's a couple of things that I'd love to touch on as part of that comment, because I think there's a lot of really interesting things in there. I think one is, how do you decide what is working and what's not working? You talked about pivoting early. How do you make those decisions, and what resources, what tools do you look at to help make those decisions?
It's a great question. We obviously need to trust our gut a little bit in some of this. So when we decided to pull out of a bunch of media in mid-March, we didn't have any data yet. It was, an unforeseen circumstance. No one had gone through this before in our lives. And so you just got to make a call sometimes. And you get some of it right, you get some of it wrong, and you learn from there. I think as we move further into some of these situations, the data can be more helpful to us. So not only looking at first-party data and the information that we're getting from our own mobile app and engagement with the brand, but also then dovetailing that into other data sets where we can understand more broadly where consumers are spending their money and engaging with brands. We tie all of that together so we can get a more well-rounded picture of the individual, really on a human basis, a person-based data approach, rather than lookalikes or modeling or things like that. And we use that to fine-tune things. We can sort of test and learn things as we go in real time, which we find very helpful. And then we continue to stay close with our consumers to hear from a more qualitative perspective what is working and what's not working. We have tremendous assets in brand tracking metrics and things like that we pay attention to. We also just talk to our consumers and listen to them, whether it's in our restaurants and doing some intercepts or working through our franchisees to hear what's happening in our restaurants, or using tools online qualitatively, listening in social media, or even engaging some of our biggest fans. We have a group of folks that we recognize as being our core group of fans that we reach out to from time to time, where we can use them to gauge their opinion on new products, ask them for feedback, things like that. It's really important that we listen to our consumers as part of the data set and evaluating what's working and how we move forward.
That's great. And obviously having that qualitative assessment just helps to really make sure that, the messaging is resonating and get some of those quick wins in terms of feedback as to what points of your messaging is working and potentially even spark innovative ideas. So, I think that it's great that you have such a direct line of connect to your core customers. Not all brands are so lucky. Speaking of which, I think, I have to admit, this is sort of, I hope you don't mind me going off the cuff a little bit. It kind of reminded me of something that I thought might be interesting to kind of say, because you talked about, you're really proud of yourselves and how you pivoted early. Are there other brands that you look to that you sort of can point to and say, these guys have done a fantastic job, or maybe they're similar brands or completely different industries that you sort of say, actually, I can look at these guys and say, I really look up to what they're up to?
That's a great question. I think anyone who's winning in the digital guest experience space is who comes to mind first. I think Domino's is obviously a darling of our industry in the fact that they've really prided themselves on being a tech brand that happens to serve pizza. And Jack is definitely not at that point yet, but the brands that had a good foundation of connecting with people where they needed them, at any time, at any moment, in any fashion, on any format, are the brands that are winning today. And, who knew that that would be the thing that propelled us through 2020? But I think it's important for even brands outside of food. There are the Domino's and Starbucks experts, or darlings, like I said. But I think outside of that, any brand that's finding a more creative way to answer what consumers need, when they need it, how they need it, is going to win in the future. Southwest comes to mind as an example of a brand that has listened to the way people look at travel differently. Even Netflix has amended their approach based on all of this content binging we were all doing in March, and then we realized we were staying home for a while and we had to get back to work. But I think it's important to just listen. Any brand that's really in tune with their customer base and can pivot based on that feedback will win.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. And it's interesting to hear you talk about, a tech company that happens to sell pizza. And I think that there is a natural pivot in most industries today as to, leveraging first party data, leveraging direct engagement with customers, and in being able to then pivot that into insightful, messaging, innovation, and outreach and customer experience. So I think that you've definitely hit on some of the things. And it sounds like, Jack in the Box has been able to do some of that this year, as more and more customers migrate to mobile first and mobile engagement with your brand. I'm kind of curious. It seems like you've had a chance to really try new things this year from a media standpoint. Maybe because you had all these legacy relationships and legacy ways in which you engage with your customer, and a lot of that has just disappeared. So it seems like you've had a chance to innovate from a media standpoint this year, as well as from a product standpoint. So I'm kind of curious if there are certain parts of your media plan and the way in which you engage consumers, if you think that will live on, if there's certain things that you've tried this year that you think will truly live on.
Yes, absolutely. As I said, I don't think that consumer behavior is going to go back to the pre-COVID world. That's in the distant past, I believe. I think everyone had to pivot in their media approach, at least to be successful. And I would say the biggest thing we did was expedite our work, because I am proud to say that we had a lot going right for us prior to this. We were already in the esports space in a very authentic way. We already had a big digital and mobile focus, even more so than a lot of our competitors. When you are sort of the David to Goliath in this industry, you need to be creative and you need to be digitally based, more so, higher percentage of our spend in mobile and digital than some of our competitors. So that served us really well. I think there's certain nuances and tweaks that have been made. For example, we had a big presence in Twitch a few years ago, but have sort of brought other partners up to par with that investment. Twitch has seen an explosion over the last couple of months. And so right back into that space in a big way, doing some really fun things. For example, giving people the opportunity to order food directly through the Twitch platform, using emojis even to order. Who knew that taco emoji could be used that much? But finding ways to leverage where people are and make it really tailored and unique to our brand to bring that unique experience has been really important.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting to hear how much you're engaging mobile and digital first, but also, looking for creative new outlets and ways in which to engage with your customers. So we've been talking a lot about the pandemic, which obviously has been a focus for most people this year. There obviously are a significant amount of disruptions facing the advertising industry as well. It just so happens that 2020 has been, an insane year of disruption. And, what I'm referring to, you mentioned that you guys are California based, but there's so much, privacy regulation coming out of California, industry limitations leading to, the deprecation of the cookie and recent announcements by IDFA. So obviously these changes can impact how we engage and reach our intended audience and how we also measure the impact of those things. So I'm just kind of curious, what do you think is the most concerning trend or challenge facing our ecosystem today?
Yeah, who knew we would be talking about cookies and CCPA rules when I was back making newspaper ads at the beginning of my career. Times were so much simpler then, and I just dated myself. But I think the future will increasingly get closer to understanding people at the individual level. And that's a double-edged sword. It's an amazing opportunity to tailor messaging and engage people in a real relationship. But there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it, obviously. I think respectfully, we can digest what customers tell us about themselves, what they need, how we can add value to their lives, and leverage all of that information in our first-party data as part of understanding their story and figuring out how to connect with them. But it is important that we have these regulations in place. I think regulations help people overall maintain a consistency in how we respect our customers and treat our customers. And I think it would be silly to be afraid of that. I think it's important at the same time that customers continue to have a voice in the way their information is managed. Some of us, even on a personal level, are more open than others. And similarly, in a digital perspective, we're going to be more or less open to what we share with other people. And I think that's okay. I think people can manage how their information is shared and used and still get really powerful, tailored brand relationships. And we as brands can still do a lot to connect with these people. As a result of them sharing anything with us, even if they are a little protective around some of that information. And I think, if you look at an example in this space, Amazon obviously knows more about their customers than a lot of brands. They have so much data mining happening around their consumer data. And I think, for the hundreds of millions of people globally who use their brand, they really like the benefit of the brand anticipating their needs and responding with great service. So it's worth it to these customers to have that exchange of information. I mean, I know firsthand, I need to know when dish soap is going to be out and it needs to be on the truck before I even figure it out. And that's worth it to me. So I think if we as brands continue to show a value, to show that we're being trustworthy and respectful, and we're giving our customers a better experience, added value for their willingness to engage with us, it'll be a great thing.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And I know as another working mom, I think we've talked about this. It's nice to have those conveniences. You want to have a positive experience, and anything that can save time and be more efficient is beneficial to us in particular, and to most people today. But obviously, there is a lot of responsibility that rests upon our shoulders as an industry to make sure that we maintain and protect that privacy.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that we obviously do at Neustar is we focus a lot on identity and the role that identity plays in helping to, also support, you talked about first party data, but also support that connection to all these other platforms and publishers that you're interacting with, and to ensure that you have a consistent and curated experience across all of these different platforms. Can you speak a little bit about identity and what role you think it plays in the future of media for Jack in the Box in particular, or as an industry as a whole?
Absolutely. I think it's important for us to continue to stay top of mind on what identity means. And that's not only the identity of each of our consumers or how we make that personal connection, but it's the role that Jack wants to play in that too. Are we the brand that is open and, wanting to have that personal connection and delivering those tailored experiences? Or are we the brand that's going to put you into a box or a bucket and sort of, decide that you're getting a certain amount of content delivered a certain way? And, obviously I think brands that are going to excel in the future are those that will provide more tailored content, and really understanding what consumers want from us again, and what they're willing to share with us to be able to tailor that content is going to be what propels our success in the future. I think it's going to be a moving target. It's absolutely important that we all think about how culture and trends and the needs of our customers are going to continue to shift as we continue to tailor that. It's a lot to sort of manage, but it's important in building a real relationship.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, it's interesting because, I think there's also a responsibility on us to educate the consumers a little bit about how that data is being used. Obviously, we don't want to utilize data in a way that, you mentioned people being more open or less open. We want to be, to your point, let the consumers respect their privacy, respect their choices. But at the same time, make sure that they understand that, what we as an industry are trying to do is to give them a more positive experience, and to not serve them an ad for something that's completely irrelevant to them. But we want to make sure that that if someone who's engaged or has a potential to be engaged in the brand could be interested in the type of content we're putting forward, that it's a positive experience for them. And the only way to do that is to leverage and lean on some of that data that exists in the marketplace.
Absolutely. Even at the most basic level, Jack is a brand that is known for the breadth and depth of the menu. And I think that has served us really well through a pandemic, actually, because we're a place where you can come 5 times in a week and not feel like you're eating the same old chicken sandwich again. And likewise, when people are eating in groups or feeding a household or a sorority, everybody can come and get what they want to feel satisfied. And so I think that variety gives us an opportunity in also tailoring the content and the messaging. And we have customers that are chicken customers, and we have customers that are burger customers. And so it's important to look at, past purchase data, as well as how consumers are, using their credit cards and other aspects of their lives to tailor some of those recommendations and responses and content truly to what might be applicable to them.
I think that's so true. And it's interesting. You talked about, so many different types of customers there. I mean, I think it's about, ensuring that you send them a message that's going to be relevant and suits their needs. If you're open to it, we do have a question from the audience. So I thought maybe I could share, 1 or 2 of those. So one of the questions that we've had is approaching emerging media channels, and how do they factor into your overall strategy?
Yeah, I think it's important for us as a brand that prides itself on being connected to culture to always pay attention to what the new emerging media channels are. I think, for example, we look at social platforms on a regular basis. TikTok has seen another place that we've seen an explosion over the last 8 months or so. And while we had dabbled in TikTok in the past, we are jumping in 2 feet forward, like as fast as we can, in this new launch I mentioned that's happening this week around the Cluck sandwich. That's why we're inviting everyone to dance the new chicken dance. But I think it's important to sort of always pay attention and then test and learn. So, sometimes we accelerate our testing process based on what we think is going to be, a place to sort of to be more risky. But I think we absolutely are always sort of trying to find the right mix of opportunities for us to connect with our consumers. And so by trying things, throw something out there a year ago on TikTok and see what hits. And, sometimes we even get into emerging media channels where we're a little bit ahead of the curve. So TikTok, for example, we actually didn't see a ton of success early on. But then once it started, and we started to find different ways to use it, more influencer-based content, things like that. That testing gives you an opportunity to figure out what's right for your brand, where the most bang for your buck is.
I love how I guess open you guys seem to be around trying different things and trying new media. I think it seems like because of where you sit in the industry and the type of brand you are, the type of brand, you described your core customer earlier as being outside the box. It seems like you guys are taking a similar approach to your marketing and the way in which you want to reach customers. So I think it's great to see, you guys take hold of some of those emerging channels and, and test and learn, like you said, to try them, but also monitor to see whether or not they're even working, and then, adapt and adjust if needed.
I agree with you. I think we are a little quirky and we don't take ourselves too seriously. So it's okay if we, pop up on Reddit for an AMA with Jackbox, and then we are somewhere else the next time you see us. It works for us.
Yeah. We also had a question that came in around brand purpose. And I know that that's some language that, I tend to follow a lot of different people who talk a lot about brand purpose. So I think it's something that's really interesting. When it comes to communicating with your consumers, how do you think about brand purpose? You've talked about your customer and who they are, but, how does that impact your approach to marketing?
I think the brand purpose is absolutely fundamental to connecting with consumers. And I think it actually goes much broader than marketing. I think it's important to know who you are as a brand and live that in every facet of your life, in your brand life. And I think that's probably changed a bit over the last few years, even from a corporate perspective. We're a publicly traded company. The street wants to know who we are and our personality to consumers. And likewise, consumers want to know who we are behind the curtain in our business practices and who we hire and our supply chain and things like that. And some brands have really taken a focus on some of those aspects, those behind the curtain aspects of their brand, like sustainability. Panera comes to mind. And I think it's important to sort of have one central, clear definition of who you are, because that will drive all of your decision making. It should really serve as the prism that you put everything through, whether that's the way your buildings are designed, the experience you have when you pull up to the drive-through window, the app experience, all of that needs to come from one true, ownable, consistent articulation of who you are as a brand. And so for Jack in the Box, we're actually working on tailoring and adjusting some of our brand purpose messaging right now. But at the end of the day, we really exist to serve our customers and give them sort of the freedom or the license to live life the way they want to be limitless, to march to the beat of their own drum. And whether that's in our food or in our environments, it's important that we have the same experience consistently across their touch points with the brand.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, you've been taking on a lot of other additional responsibilities. You mentioned diversity and inclusion. All of those things go into, supporting that brand purpose. So I think that makes sense. And it's great to see someone in your position have such, involvement in these other aspects of the corporate messaging and engagement in the industry.
I think, that's a great point, Allison. And I think that came to light, I think, in March and April for a lot of brands. As I've talked to some colleagues across the industry and other businesses, when the world stopped on March 13th, at least in the US, and we said, oh gosh, what do we do now? I feel like a lot of people around the executive team table looked to the marketer in the room to say, what do consumers need from us? And how do we go about this in a way that's right for our brand? And so I think there was an interesting shift in some businesses in the marketer sort of being seen as more of that guide across the organization to how we tackle some of these real issues. In our space, it's operations and cleanliness and procedural stuff, putting bag stickers on bags so that they haven't been tampered with in delivery, things like that, that really the consumer mindset came first and the brand approach was part of the solution. And I think that's happening more and more than it was prior to March.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting to hear, especially things as simple as bag stickers. Just understand, if you really put the customer first and have the customer as the forefront of your mind, then you start to, those things just flow naturally in terms of how you execute. Speaking of which, I guess, what is one thing you mentioned talking to other folks in the industry? You mentioned obviously a lot of commits that you guys have had to make. What is the one thing you learned this year that you think you'll take forward in terms of 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, I don't know if I can narrow it to one. I think there's a lot. I think, not to sound cheesy, but I would say we're better together. I think there's been an openness in information sharing, and sort of, rolling your sleeves up and just being a smart person in the room, not necessarily fitting into a silo, that has happened in a couple places. One is across an executive team, around that digital roundtable, being able to just sit down as a team and think about how you're going to approach the brand and where you want to take in the future to do what's best for your consumers and your customers. Collaboratively, I feel like is less siloed than it was before. And similarly, the information sharing across marketers and those networks has been tremendous. There have been so many free reports, consumer data, research pieces shared without, needing to sign an NDA or sign up for a program or buy a thing. And likewise, a lot of marketers have gotten together with their peers to just say, how are you approaching this and what's working for you? Even, environments that Brand Innovators has provided in terms of fireside chats and things like that. Sometimes there's not even an audience or attendees. It's just a chance for marketers to connect and talk, at a human level as to how we all navigate this thing. And I really hope that continues.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. And I think it's interesting to hear. I mean, we've really enjoyed the opportunity to engage with marketers and to talk about these things. And it's there's so much we can learn from this year. And I think it's good to hear that the collaboration is one of the things that's most exciting about what's happened this year. We have one more question that I think is really interesting, and it relates to the topic of customer that I think would be really nice to hear kind of your perspective on, because we've been talking so much about the customer and the ways in which you guys have been creative. You talked a little bit about TikTok. Is user-generated content an important part of your brand strategy? And any tips that you might have for the audience in terms of user-generated content and doing it well?
Yeah, I think it's an awesome opportunity for us to engage with our consumers. People love to share about themselves, and so UGC is a place that we like to play. You have to know the time and place for it, I think, a little bit. For example, on Instagram, while we do some posts that will be reposts of comments from our guests and our fans, stories are a great place for UGC, and a chance to sort of repost content that people have shared with us. And I would say our audience really wants that content. They want to see that stuff. It's real and it's meaningful and it's not, a brand spot. So I think it's a great place for our brand at least to play. And I would encourage others to engage in that. My guidance in doing it would be make sure that it continues to tell the story about your brand. There's certain UGC that's going to be right for one brand and not right for another. And if we are focusing on not only giving our consumers the kind of content that they want, but also being consistent in what we say about ourselves as a brand, use that as a filter. But I think generally, this is real content. It's what people want because it's relatable. And I think it's why influencers, for example, have sort of blown up over the last 2 years, because it's a real, relatable human sort of approach to content. And I would say for us in particular, above and beyond that, who doesn't love some good food porn? So people can share some ooey gooey, cheesy, delicious shots of Jack food, and we'll repost that all day long.
Yeah, that's funny. And I think you're touching on, it goes back to what you've been saying about brand purpose and the customer. That authenticity is such an important part of how we live our lives these days. And it's so nice to be able to leverage that as part of your brand messaging. So I have two final questions. One is for the industry as it relates to marketing, and two as it relates to QSR. So I'm curious, what do you think, how do you think QSR industry has changed permanently in the last year, for better or for worse? Let's start with QSR as the industry in which you guys operate.
Yeah, I think it has definitely changed. One of the things that we're talking about now is, do we need all those dining rooms? Because we have always been a brand that had a very high proportionate amount of our sales happening off premise. So largely through the drive-through, but also walk-in and takeout orders. Our third-party delivery partnerships continue to grow. The mobile app and the ability to order ahead online and pick up continues to grow. We're dovetailing delivery into our app now through Olo. And so we're just seeing less people sit in a dining room, partially because of restrictions right now, but I don't think it's going to go back to where we were. So I think QSR permanently needs to be conscious of how consumers are using the brand differently. And if that means our restaurant footprints change a little bit, it's probably not a bad thing.
It's interesting. I think there's so much. You just have to keep an eye on your customer and make sure that that's relevant for your core customer. Right? I think depending on the brand, depending on the type of brand, and do you have, a split strategy? You mentioned Starbucks earlier. They have obviously, a split strategy in some of their more premium options versus more, other options. So, thinking about what does that look like for the future is really interesting. Mm-hmm. I also am curious what you think about the marketing industry, and would love to hear your predictions for the future of marketing and how that will change.
I think culture is going continue to shift. And for brands that are steeped deeply in culture and trends, paying attention to that and thinking about how we're going to continue winning the hearts and minds of consumers is going to be important. We need to continue keeping a close pulse on cultural shifts and customer expectations as part of those changes. And I think, as I sort of alluded to, more and more marketing can't exist in a silo or in a vacuum. It really needs to be connected to the full customer experience. And that is largely centered around mobile, but it's more than just marketing stuff. It is the experience. And I think it's important that marketers focus on building a deep integration with product teams, customer service teams, the restaurant environment, because all of that is now serviced not only from the brand, but also through digital channels, not just the more traditional channels. And I think, sort of all of that is underpinned by a reliance or an importance of data and being able to understand what our consumers want from us and what's working and what's not working, so that we can find those smarter ways to connect and collaborate. And like I said, build that holistic experience centered on the customer and what they want from us.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because you're talking so much about, the customer being at the core, and that's really been the focus. Do you have any advice for marketers who are thinking about exploring new media channels? You talked about TikTok, you've talked about, gaming and sports. Do you have ways in which, or best practices that you would share in terms of how you do that in an authentic way, in a way that's still relevant and thinking about the future, and you talking about, keeping an eye on the cultural things? I think we can assume that there will be new media channels that will arise in the future as well. So how do you enter those in a way in which that's, authentic and still engaging?
I think it really comes down to testing and learning, and you can't test everything. None of us have budgets as big as we would like. So it's important, I think, to look at that data, listen to customers, even if it's more qualitative than quantitative, and really understand where your customers are living their lives. What are the platforms that they're on? And, how do they want to engage? How are they already engaging with their other friends in their lives? And then how can you sort of dovetail into that conversation, really using that test and learn approach to see what people respond well to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you have certain processes or teams set up? Like, who do you pull into that test and learn environment?
I think it depends on what we're testing, but I would say from a more traditional media approach, we do a couple things to keep ourselves honest. First and foremost, we allocate a portion of our media spend every year to innovation. And so it's just a bucket of money that we earmark to say we want to try something new and different, whether it's a new partner or a new platform or a new data approach. And we also make sure that in those conversations, we're bringing to the table everyone that's involved. So again, for some of our more traditional media approaches, we would absolutely have our sales analytics team, consumer insights teams internally, as well as all of our external partners. We put a lot of emphasis on our agency partners because we have quite a roster of them to work in a very integrated fashion, so that we're thinking about the media impact, the digital impact, the social impact, the PR impact. It all works together. And so if that means that we need to have 6 different partners at the table for one initiative, we do it. And that's actually more frequently the case than otherwise, because you can't operate in a silo anymore.
Yeah, we find that too. It's interesting that you say that. One of the things that we always promote as part of that agile, data-driven marketing is the best thing that anybody can do is to pull the right folks into the room. And if that means more folks than you probably would have wanted to, it's way more efficient, way more effective, because everybody's marching to the same path, same leader in terms of the goal. And so I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
You're right.
So we are basically wrapping up on time, I believe. I think my last question, maybe I'll make a fun question if that's okay, Isabel. You've been talking a lot about content and streaming and everything that we're doing at home. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations to the audience in terms of content that you have found just really engaging and interesting over the last 6 to 9 months, and that you would share with the group?
I would say that I went down a Bustle wormhole a little bit. We have done some partnerships with Bustle over the years, and continue to expand our partnership with them and really enjoy it. And for research purposes, I end up spending an inordinate amount of time there. But I would say outside of that, unfortunately, I am in the life stage where I watch a lot of Paw Patrol. So that's what's streaming on all my devices right now. And I can't wait to get back to sort of more content geared for my interests.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, Adrian. So we are one of the, I shouldn't promote anybody in particular, but we are an active user of Disney Plus. So that was a fun addition to the household this year. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And it's been great chatting with you. So Isabella, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. And Adrian, I'm a new Jack in the Box convert since I did move just now to the Pacific Northwest. I had never tried it before. And I can say it is great for someone like me who has a million dietary restrictions and allergies because there is always something I can try. So thank you. Usually I have like one option wherever I go.
Awesome.
So it's great. Well, I really, really enjoyed your guys' conversation and really hope to have you back soon, Adrian and Allison.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, that was such a great kickoff conversation for today's live cast. We're going to be moving into our next fireside chat of the day. We are joined by Paolo, the Vice President of Media and Data for the U.S. from Anheuser-Busch InBev. And this session will be moderated by Ken Harlan, the founder and the CEO of Mobile Fuse. And I know Ken is has moderated with us before and has done a great job. So I'm handing it over to good hands. But welcome to the stage, both of you.
Thanks, Isabel.
Hi, Isabel.
Paolo, how are you?
Hi, Ken. All good. You?
Good. So we have a lot to talk about. And I know there's a lot of people that are interested to hear what you have to say. But before we go there, if you could share a little bit about you and your background, because you have you went from one of the largest ad tech platforms to one of the largest spenders globally. Not many people can claim that. So if you could share a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So yes, I did start my career in media at Google. I joined the European team right after my graduate degree, and after a short stint in sales on the team, I moved then to the marketing and media organization within Google. And it's interesting because people think about Google oftentimes as a publisher; they don't think about it as a very large advertiser, right? And I was fortunate enough to work with some brilliant people there to set up the internal media team and that guides the advertising and promotion of all the Google products, both on the B2B and the B2C side at a global level. My focus and specialization was on performance marketing and performance marketing strategy. And so guiding the way we were working with all our agencies when we were buying across the board, right? From traditional to digital to everything else, right? Measuring performance and making sure that, we were meeting our objectives. After almost 10 years there, I got a call from someone that was recruiting for AB. And at the beginning, it was interesting because it's like, AB or company, but then they were like, no, listen, there is this company within AB called ZX that they're actually ZX Ventures. They're actually doing incubation and innovation, and so we're looking for someone to manage the marketing globally for e-commerce for them and the nascent e-commerce platforms that they had. So I joined that role, and after 3 years there, I 3 years, but really felt like dog years to some degree in a very positive way. But we did a lot on that front. We grew incredibly. Then I was tapped on the shoulder again and say, hey, we're looking for a head of media for the US. And honestly, I was also there a little bit torn because, I feel like I was going from media to marketing to media again, but actually what it was given as perspective to me, and actually it's very true, is that the way we do media within Anheuser-Busch in the United States is something a little unique on its own in the way we partner with sponsorship and events and all these kind of things. And I feel like I've learned a lot and it's been a great experience on this front, and it's exciting every day.
Awesome. Great. And just so the audience knows, Can you share what's the difference between AB InBev, right? That's globally, and Anheuser-Busch, right? Because I know we talked about this. So if you could kind of let everyone know what the difference is.
For sure, very good clarifying question. We talk about AB InBev as our global group and company, but then in the United States we refer to it as Anheuser-Busch, or AB for short, and it's just describing the US entity, and I'm leading media and data for the US entity myself, and I work with my global counterparts and other countries as well to benchmark and improve every day.
Great. And before we get started, a little bit about me for everyone, so you know. My name's Ken Harlan, founder, CEO of Mobile Fuse. Outside of, say, Facebook and Google, when it comes to in-app, large reach in the US, we're one of the main companies. We work with a lot of agencies and brands, specifically around receptive moments and really impactful creative. So, okay. All right, so let's go back. I mean, I know a lot of these we start back in, hey, what happened in March and April, and we won't spend a lot of time there. But I think it's a good way for folks to, hey, you know, how did Anheuser-Busch, you and your team and your efforts, you know, what transformed? Like, take us back short term, you know, COVID, its impact, and changes you guys made right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a good way to start to think about the future, right? You want to see how we got there and how we're going to move forward. You know, so I think that as many other, you know, brands, companies, and advertisers out there, the first thing was a little bit of a shock in terms of saying, okay, what's happening, and figuring out how we would adjust our strategy in order to adjust to the fact that people were locking down, people weren't traveling anymore, people weren't doing the things that they used to do. So, for example, we had to answer the question, what do we do for our out-of-home media, and how do we pivot maybe to digital out-of-home, and trying to zero in on those areas where we know people are going to concentrate. For example, grocery stores, right? When they do, you know, they're shopping now once every 2 weeks, maybe, rather than once, you know, a week or so, or geofencing for, you know, mobile, to move much more into the shopper marketing kind of mentality versus you know, broader branding awareness and brand equity. And that is also another thing that we had to do, thinking about you know, how do we switch our messaging for something that was much more relevant and sensitive to what people were doing at the time, or cared for at that time, right? So if it's, you know, either stock up, or, you know, thinking through what, you know, their safety and what they care for. So in that sense, we went through 4 phases in terms of tuning our message to the moments in time. We first of all was addressing the consumer fears, what we call them, right? In terms of saying, am I safe? What's happening? And all these kind of things. And there is where AB did a great work in terms of working with our partners to converting some facilities to Red Cross blood donation centers, or producing hand sanitizer, right? Which is a byproduct of alcohol, which we're very familiar with. You know, and the second thing was creating new occasions, and therefore, you know, people were locked at home and thinking through, okay, how are they going to pass time? So we had, you know, music streaming and you know, food pairing sessions and things that could keep people entertained. Then the third phase was a little bit like, you know, how can we help our partners and bars and restaurants and everything to grow again, and because of the lockdown. So we had initiatives like Open for Takeout, where we were promoting some of the bars and restaurants where you can order food and together with drinks, and you know, or other partnerships that we've done in order to support small venues in terms of concert venues and things like this. And then the last phase was, how do we, you know, return to the new normal, if you will? And so what is the return of sports going to look like? And so we've activated in a very interesting way when there was the golf tournament called The Match earlier this year, or even if you've seen followed the NBA season recently, right? How do we cater to a world where there's not a live audience? And it was a very interesting challenge, but we had to adapt. And through this process of adaptation, we learned very much. We learned a lot, and it was interesting.
That's great. So before we move on to kind of where you're at and where you're going, what was, you mentioned a few things, but what was kind of like your proudest moment, being a part of AB during this time?
Yeah, no, I think that there are a few things that really made me proud of the situation. First of all, how the company has reacted, right? And thinking, okay, let's tone down all our product and brand messages and really focus on what can we do to help the community, right? And so the hand sanitizers and the blood drives, those were very important. But reflecting on it for a second, I think that the thing that makes me the most proud is the example that we were able to set for everyone in our company, especially the more junior folks in our company. At that point, we normalized the fact that the most immediate and important thing to be done is helping out the community, right? So, for example, when I got the note from the Red Cross saying, "Hey, we are having issues with blood donations because people are not going out, they're not donating blood. Is there anything that you can do in order to help us, with some media inventory to draw attention to this problem?" And everyone in the team dropped everything, and they, pull up, media buys and digital out of the home boards and geofence buys that were overlapped with where the donation centers were, in order to, to help out as fast as we can. And it was remarkable, right? And then also it was beautiful to see when we reached out to our partners, like our DSPs, they were like, "Oh, this is a great thing that you guys are doing. Let us help out and double down on, the media you're spending with us in order to push that program further." And, I think that the reason why it makes me proud is that because if leadership is a testimony of what you leave behind, here we really gave a chance to the younger generations of leader to know how to react in a situation like this, which is, for me, is remarkable. It's very important.
It's great. It's great. So one of the things I know we talked about, hey, where do we go from here, right? There's been a lot of adjustments, right? But where I really enjoy, I obviously enjoy talking to you all the time, but one of the things I found really interesting was your term, attention-based economy. And you said, look, that's where we're going. That's what we're doing. And probably everyone right now, is thinking, what's he going to say? But it's actually, once you work through it, it makes a lot of sense. So can you explain what attention-based economy is, and then where you see AB kind of shifting to go in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good question, because as you know very well, this is one of my obsession here in my role. But, before I go into the details, I want to start by saying that, for how challenging and difficult this year is, I think that, there is that great quote from Winston Churchill that says, "Never waste a good crisis," right? And I think that This is the moment we're in right now. Just like we are in a moment of challenge, and we need to figure out if we want to use this moment in order to move forward and build a better future in that sense. And so this is, the work that I'm also doing with the ANA and some network partners, some agency partners, and all this kind of things. But related to the attention economy, I think that, we are in a moment where attention is a very scarce resource, and we all have to work together in order to figure out how we align incentives and the ways of working for all the players, so that people can actually, we can capture consumer attention and actually incentivize the system to create an environment where we can capture consumer attention. Just to, contextualize this a little bit more, we are in a world where, we know that 30% of the ads that are aired on TV are aired in an empty room, right? And we know that 80% of people are using a second screen when they're watching TV. We know that there are many formats on the digital side, and no impression is equal to the other one, right? When you go and do the buy, and therefore we cannot even compare them. And so, in this context, an impression becomes very meaningless, and therefore, for me, is an attentive impression is what really matters. And therefore, figuring out, okay, how can I work with the TV networks and my digital partners and everyone to create an attentive environment, so my impressions are paid more attention to. And I think that this is a win-win situation, because allows, all the players in this space to actually win, because a more attentive environment means that my media has a higher impact, but at the same time, it can command a higher premium because coming from a performance marketing background, I don't care about the unit cost. I care about the ROI. So I think that, the attention economy and moving towards an attention-based measurement and cost system, or media currency system, I think it's the future of this industry and what we could use this crisis to pivot and focus on.
Right. And I didn't share this with you, but I think you'll get a kick out of this. Goldfish, I mean, it's kind of sad too, but goldfish have an attention span of 9 seconds, and apparently humans now have an attention span of 8 seconds. So to your point around focusing on attention-based initiatives, right? Spot on. So have you had any is there any examples or any kind of anything that you can share that you feel like, hey, this has been, a good test or a good direction for moving towards that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have actually started working with two TV network partners in order to optimize our buys towards viewability and attention. And viewability in the TV space is measured as someone in the room when the ad is airing, with a second-by-second monitoring. And as we work towards this way of buying and optimizing, we've seen a couple of very important and meaningful stats. The first thing is that obviously our viewability and attention goes up, and therefore it means that my ad is not served in an empty room, but actually has a higher chance of driving an impact. But
Right.
also, the delivery from the network side has been very positive in a world where ratings are declining and all these kind of things. And again, I think that has allowed us to find a white space for both parties to build a competitive advantage, but at the same time build something that adds value on both sides of the equation. So we're still early in the stage in the testing phase, but I think that it's an opportunity ripe for development.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, I'm going to show a little bit of my time in this space, but been here 20 plus years. But Moat, right, as you know, is a viewability company, but they were actually founded originally to measure time spent, not for viewability. And they happen to find more business. So, that's really it's really funny how it went to viewability, right?
And you mentioned Mo, but actually, it kind of based also on experience. I remember when I was at Google, we were working a lot with Mo and the metrics they were measuring. And so when I saw an opportunity working with another company called TVision to actually do a kind of same viewability and attention measuring on TV, it was like, well, it's something that we've been doing on the digital side for a very long time. What if we bring this concept to TV? And actually, it's been a very, very interesting space and exercise to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we've seen a lot of clients. They start to care more about cost per incremental visit. They care about engagement, right? Not only did they open or click on the ad, but what did they do? Did they interact with it? Where did they spend their time? And clients are spending more and more. Marketers are spending more and more time with those things. So
yeah,
I definitely see the same trend. Okay, you mentioned TV, you mentioned digital. What are your views? TV and radio, and you mentioned billboard. Really static is kind of like the traditional model, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, digital is anything from mobile, or you mentioned digital out of home. Connected TV, right? There's a lot that falls in that category as well. Like, what's your view of those? Is traditional dead? Is it all digital? Is it a mix going forward? And where do you plan to take AB and all that?
Yeah, I'm opinionated about this stuff, so I think it's a good question. But yes, no, I'm gonna be a little controversial just for the sake of this conversation. But to answer your question, I don't think TV is dead at all, but is a moment where again we have an opportunity to change things significantly. I think that most of advertisers, and we're guilty of that to some degree as well, is that we're looking at TV all wrong. And I think they were being, buying and transacting on TV in the wrong way. I think that, I've seen stats recently that, most advertisers buy, for example, 1849 on TV. And that means that 60% of the impressions that TV serves are given away for free, meaning that there is an older demo that is heavy consumer, but they don't get rewarded for that demo, right? So this misalignment of how you think about TV, how you buy TV, and what TV can deliver creates all sorts of distortions in terms of what a network needs to do in order to bring up back the revenue and all these kind of things, and advertisers packing more and more ads into that space. And I think that we are wrong as advertisers to, ask of TV to act as a super precise medium or a precise medium when we're actually was built not to be that precise, to be a mass medium, right? So let's recognize what it can bring, what cannot bring, and therefore make sure that our buys and expectations for that medium are aligned to that. And obviously, in order to move away from what we've done for years and years and years, it requires collaboration and flexibility on both sides. But at the same time, I honestly don't think that TV is that at all. Actually, TV has a couple of secret weapons that, for whatever reasons keep eluding the digital players, or they're not investing as much. TV, first and foremost, can have a great reach, and all the conversations that you have with the digital players, with your agencies and everything is build your reach TV first, and then you have incremental reach on digital, and that reach on digital is more and more incremental. But, when can we gonna go back to a point where we can start digital first and then eventually you go on TV, right? As performance marketer, like for example, mobile gaming companies have done in the past, they saturated everything that is uber targetable, and then because they couldn't buy anything more than there, then they went mass, right? In that sense, and more traditional in that space. And then the second thing is that TV has the TV networks, they're content producer. They can produce content and they can integrate me in the broadcast in a way that a digital, player with a 15-second pre-roll, it's not going to be the same value. And so I think that, in that sense, there is a much different value that is passed on depending on who you work with. And we need to align to that and leverage the strength of a medium versus the other. I think that if the TV, players don't get out of the game of lower rating, high demand, and therefore price increase, and leaning on price flexibility in order to make the realize the value for them, it's going to be a challenge for them as these big digital player with big deep pockets are coming on board and are figuring out how to play in this space. But at the same time, they can lean on their strength. They can produce great content. They can keep the attention in a way that no one else can. And therefore, I think that this is where the future is, and opportunities and areas for both players, and how they're going to play it out, for me, is fascinating, and to see it come to life.
It sounds like to me, when you talk about just generally in advertising, you think that the way you buy needs to change, and you need to reward for the right audiences and be able to measure it, whether it's quote unquote traditional or digital. It's not really a one or the other, right?
100%. It's a mix of both. And I think that, again, the message I always try to pass on with all the the partners that I work with is that, hey, as an advertiser, I also have my limits and things that I can do better. But if we all agree and work together to improve, right, to use this crisis in order to move to a better standard and hold hands on that, I think that we're going to get to a point where consumer and people are going to be appreciative of that, and our business are going to grow together.
Right. So you're holding a lot of your partners more accountable and wanting them to change, and so that's great. And one of the other things that we talked about is how is it becoming more relevant for consumers, right? And you're holding yourself accountable. How are some of the ways that becoming more relevant for your customers?
Yeah, there are a few things that we're doing, but if I were to break it down very simply, is two things. One is becoming part of the content, and the other one is being maniacal in the way we monitor consumer response, right? And so the first piece is becoming part of the content is the very short anecdote. Someone in the previous panel was mentioning Peppa Pig, and actually, I have this story that the moment I started. My daughter is now 4, but when she was 2 and I had a cable subscription, and I started having her watch Peppa Pig on TV, the moment the ads came on, she started freaking out because she's like, why do you take away Peppa Pig from me, right? And thinking this as an example of the future generation, not knowing what an ad is, right? Or not liking ads, avoiding ads. And if daddy is making a living and putting her through college by buying and selling buying ads, right? That's going to be an issue. So, but that's a simple anecdote to say that you want to make sure that your brand becomes part of the content and what people care for, right? And we've done a lot of work this year, as I was saying before. For example, when the NBA came back in the bubble, right, with the ultra court side, we have done concerts throughout this year with Bud Light Seltzer sessions and becoming part of the content in that sense. We have organized gaming tournaments also with Bud Light because that's where people were spending time. And actually, we're organizing now a concert for New Year's Eve with Bud Light. And actually, if anyone wants to go and RSVP, little plug here, budlight.com/NYE. It's going to be a great event for a lockdown world. But integrating our brands with what people care about, it's what's important. And then the other thing is, as I was saying, being maniacal in terms of measuring impact. The blessing and the curse that a company like ABI has is the fact that they are very, very strict about, thinking about what the North Star is, what the metrics are, and then coming back to measuring the impact you're having on those metrics. So we have developed a metric called Attention One Score, which basically shows when you put out a piece of content, being this paid or non-paid or everything, figuring out how people react to that content, and then dialing up the things that work and pulling back or iterating on the things that don't work. And therefore, the combination of these two things have been critical. The last piece, though, that we still have to figure out is how do you balance the two things, right? Because being relevant for consumers have not only a short-term impact on sales and picking up that beer, but in terms of brand equity. And oftentimes the limit that we have is that how do you balance the dollar I want to spend on driving a sale right now versus the dollars that I can bring back with that, brand equity that then will translate to in sales 6 to 12 months from now. And I think that is a big challenge that we haven't solved for, but I think that we have all the elements in place in order to act on it.
Great. Now, we've talked a lot about advertising, right, and media. And obviously AB is well known for a lot of iconic ads. I think back to, when it comes to advertisers and Christmas, right? It's some great ads. What's like one or two of your favorite ads that you've put out there that, whether it was either you were involved in or it could have been a predecessor of yours, or can you give a couple examples?
I think that some ads that are very, very interesting is, for example, what we've done in this past Super Bowl with Bud Light Seltzer, and we had this ad with Post Malone. And I remember that we were in a point where right before Super Bowl, we had two versions of the spot, and we didn't know exactly which one to run because we were so great, but we had one spot, right? 1/62 to run. And so we put it up on YouTube, and then we had people vote on it and actually pick the spot. And then we integrated it again as becoming part of the content. We integrated in the broadcast some lookalikes that we put in the stadiums that looked like Post Malone, and they were part of the audience. And so when after the spot, people came back to the broadcast with the spot in real life. And some of other iterations, we had also worked with memes and other things like this in order to make this really a thing when we launched. And you could argue there are, as you said, there are so many Anheuser-Busch spots that are so remarkable and so memorable. But I really enjoyed this one here recently where, we were able to, again, break the barrier between what is advertising versus what is content and what is entertainment, and making a large stage like the Super Bowl for me was really, really remarkable and enjoyable.
That's great. That's great. So just going back to before, you had said, when we talked about your expectations and changes, right? Of how you're buying, what you're buying, how it's structured, right? And that reminds me of, there's so much talk about agency use in housing, right? I mean, us at Mobile Fuse, we've shared, I mean, it used to be a small percent was working with brands directly like yourself. I mean, just 3 years ago, it was 1%, right? This year, it's over 40%. I mean, so it's, but we work with agencies all the time and right. So where do you think it's going? Like, do you think that's just a short blip and it's going to be all back to agencies? Do you think the model's going to change? Do you think it's all going to be in-house? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think that even in this case, we are in a moment of transformation and things are going to evolve. But, we often like the headlines of saying, okay, TV is dead, agency is dead, and all these kind of things. And it's not true. I think that there's a tremendous value that, there is tremendous value in housing, especially when you're bringing in a core competence that is going to be for your business. I think that, thinking about in housing, you shouldn't be thinking about that differently than buying a house. Is that going to be a core competence that's going to stay with you for a very long time, and therefore you want to make an investment and bring it in, but then figuring out how you can leverage the agency in order to flex up either resources or solve a very big difficult problem or something that is outside your core competences in that sense. And in that regard, I think that the agency model of the future is going to have to be something that is way more modular and flexible in the way that actually allows it to enhance everything that an advertiser does. But we cannot discount the value that you can bring with someone even having an outside perspective and keeping you aware of what you could be doing better. And the last thing I think that when it comes to agencies and the value that they can bring, one thing I'm a very big fan of is not only the big transformational ideas that take me like 6 months to enact and break out all my contracts and all these kind of things. I think that partners that can, on a daily basis, figure out how we can change things from a weekly standpoint or a monthly standpoint, do things that are marginally better every time, that are actually at the end of the year are going to have it make a big difference. I think that aspect of it is undervalued because it gives you a much higher hit rate of success of things that you actually make a change on and drive an impact versus putting all your eggs in the one big transformational basket that sometimes, due to circumstances like a global pandemic, you cannot act on. So, those are my thoughts, but I guess that, like anyone else.
And then, you mentioned a little bit about sports and the Super Bowl. Obviously, AB is a where do you see that relationship with the different sports leagues going forward, post COVID?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit, but I think I got the gist of the question. And so I was saying at the beginning, the way we do media and advertising and marketing at AB, Anheuser-Busch in the US especially, is very much a connection between what we do from a media standpoint, from a sponsorship standpoint, and from an experiential standpoint. To the point that actually our group is called the Connections team, right? And with the synergy that we were able to create with both our, for example, advertising partners and our sponsorship partners has been very valuable. I think that, for example, we were able to do things like during the NFL draft, the Boo the Commish kind of activation. That is something that you could not possibly do if you don't have a very strong relationship with the NFL and with the media partners in that sense. So that's something that becomes extraordinary, right? And the way you want to capitalize on those opportunities is by mixing, first of all, aligning on cultural relevance. What are the things that your audience cares about, that your brand can be credible upon, and therefore, the lighthearted fun of Bud Light and the NFL is something that it came together in that sense. You want to work with your partners in order to do both custom content to that degree, but also to do integrations and be part of the broadcast, if you will. You want to think about how you're going to engage consumers and users and people that are going to watch that on the screen and then interact with a powerful hashtag or something that gets them into the game and become part of the game again, become part of the entertainment in that sense. And then at the end of the day, I come from a performance marketing background, so you cannot deny me of, okay, but how are we driving the business forward? How are we driving sales and all these kind of things? And how do we make that part of a commercial integration, part of the whole campaign, not just add on at the end of the planning cycle? I think that is some of the pillars of how we have thought differently about things. But again, COVID has become for us a way to actually apply pressure on a way of working and figure out better and improved ways of creating synergies and making something come to life. So I'm expecting better, more integrated relationship between partnership, between media, experiential, and everything. But at the same time, thinking through how can we activate in a way that we can really make an impact rather than just spreading ourselves too thin. And so in that sense, fewer is better from, in many, many degrees.
Totally agree with that. So we're moving on to our Q&A session here, Paolo. And, I have to say there's might be a record number of questions. So we'll try to get through as much as we can. But what I'll do, if there's a question here, obviously that you don't want to answer, just say, hey, could we go to the next question? So,
for sure.
All right. So, first question is, you've talked about delivering purpose-based marketing to a certain extent. We're trying to shift towards that with some of your advertising. Type of measurement for sentimental lift, right? Brand equity lift in a way, but even specifically to sentiment.
This is the tricky part right now in this day and age, is that we have a lot of established way of measuring sentiment and as you said, right, from a brand equity lift and things like this, but also getting a pulse of how we actually the real time kind of analysis of how people are going to be reacting is interesting, is a huge opportunity, something that needs to be figured out. We have our own internal creative agency called Draftline, and we've and with them, we're trying to figure out how we can take that real-time signals in order to understand exactly what's working and what's not working. But again, the thing that we're trying to figure out is then, okay, what's working now? What is the impact that it's going to take, in the immediate sales or in the immediate impact short term versus long term, and how we balance the two? Because when you have to make an investment in terms of saying, okay, let's push more of this, push less of that, then let's figure out, what is the implication of that decision. And that has something to be figured out. But I think that the one thing that we got very well is figuring out when something has traction, understanding that early, and that's also to the internal creative capabilities that we have in-house, for sure.
Okay. So this is so we've talked a lot about creativity, and this comes from actually a fellow marketer that leads up a pretty large team as well. How do you continue your creativity with everyone working remotely?
That is a very good question, and it's a challenge. But I think that thankfully we we thought that remote working in many instances was going to be the end of everything that we do. And then unfortunately, we had to prove ourselves that we can do a lot of things that we didn't think were possible. But also there is a combination of elements here that, let's also take the bright side of this situation. I'm in meetings back to back all day, but if I have a 30 minutes, break, I go and play with my daughter again, or, do something that distracts me for a second outside of a work environment. That actually allows us to bring back creativity or a different way of thinking on a problem that if you're just in an office environment, it doesn't allow your head to go into that direction. And so I think that there are, if we're able to, strike the right balance for our teams and our people between, the work environment and the personal life in the situation and the context that we're living in, I think that there are opportunities to be tapped in order to foster creativity, foster productivity, solve problem solving, and all these kind of things. But that only happens if we're all, aware and conscious that, what was before cannot be in a situation where we're all locked at home.
Right. My team could tell you years ago, I said, we're not going to do work-life balance anymore. We're going to do work-life integration, right? So that they both work well together. And you don't shut one off to go to the other and vice versa. Here's another great question. Okay. So you talked about testing a lot of new things or potentially testing out new partnerships, and there's new avenues. Like how, you have such great traditions and how do you test new channels? How do you approach those?
We try to be very methodical with ourselves and our agency partners, and then with our media partners in understanding what success looks like for us, and then understanding what is the brief that we give to our agency and our media partners, and understand how they can respond to that brief. So we take a lot of effort in doing the early planning, and again, this is another really good thing of the structure that AB brings to the table in terms of saying we do very methodical work in terms of 10-year planning, 3-year planning, 1-year planning. And it's very structured, and it forces you to think about the future of what where you're at and where the future has to be. And then based on that, you can also align your teams in thinking, okay, where are we? What can we improve? Where do we want to move? And that is in circumstance that at that point, it becomes very, very clear then to your agency and your media partners what you need and what you need to help solve for. And actually, we have enacted in the past couple of years a process with our agency where you are the new partners day. We have the existing partners day and the new partners day. And the existing partners, we with the concept of fewer and better, we bring all together, right? From digital, traditional, and everyone, right? All in one room when we could, right? We're gonna have to be creative now this year, and figuring out, okay, this is where AB is going. This is the challenge for my TV friends, my digital friends, my social friends, my programmatic friends, and and figuring out, okay, guys, this is the challenge I have to solve. This is what I loved, and this is where we fell short. So bring me more of that and less of that, right? And then the same way is, we try to be very methodical with the new partners and figuring out these are the challenges in a abbreviated version of the brief that our agency delivers to these new partners, figuring out what are the challenges, give a couple of brand example and say, hey, how would you go about solving this problem? And I think that has been incredibly useful to show the potential new partners that really put the homework to create a custom solution for you versus just basically lifting, a PowerPoint from one pitch to the other pitch and just, bringing forward whatever they had. And allowed us to really find new great partners that we have grown our relationships in. So that structure allowed us to then move in a better direction.
Smart, really smart. Okay, the next question here is going back to the whole in-housing versus agency relationship. They were curious. How do you leverage the agency today, and what do you have in-house? What capabilities do you how do you divide that up today?
Yeah, we have, so we have, our team is structured, the team that sits under me is structured in three parts. We have what we call a media team that focuses on overall media coordination, the whole media budget and everything, and they're assigned brand by brand. Then we have a digital media team that takes care more specifically about social and programmatic. But then they are not traders per se, so they're not an in-house agency, if you will, but more of a strategic consultant and coordination that goes deeper than the media team on the high-tech knowledge requirement that these social channels and the tech channels require. And then we have the data team that, kind of fuels everything that we do and enhances everything that we do. We work with a social agency, we work with our media agency, and then we work with the different DSPs. And so we have, I would say, a hybrid model. And that's, I think that, it's working very well for us. So again, if you could think about the concept of in-housing, for me, is more of a co-location whenever you could, than an in-housing per se in that sense.
Makes sense. Well, I see Isabel, and I haven't even been watching the time. And I love seeing you, Isabel, but I'm a little disappointed that the time with Paolo is up. So, Paolo, it's been great. I mean, you were fantastic, and you gave a lot of great insights. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us. That was a great session, and really, really loved having you, Paolo, and hearing about what you guys are doing over at AB. So hope to see you guys both back soon.
Thank you, Isabel.
Bye, guys. So that was a really, really great conversation within our Future of Media livecast. So I'm super excited to welcome our next session. We're gonna have a special treat, a keynote from Dallas Lawrence, the head of communications at Roku platform, and he's gonna be sharing some of his insights on holiday shopping trends and streaming trends. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Dallas. Let me know if you have any screen sharing issues.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. We'll just go ahead and share our screen here and see if the magic works. You'll have to let me know if that's populating.
Yeah, I think it's looking nice and clear.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Well, I'm really pleased to join you all. We're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about the holidays and what we're seeing in the holiday market, what we're seeing from consumers, some of the major shifts that we're seeing in the market, and how that's impacting the way marketers are really approaching their holiday campaigns, and some of the implications we think this will have going into 2021. So we're going to really start with unwrapping some of the survey results of a nationwide survey we did with the Harris Poll that really dives deep into consumer trends. As I said, we'll look at streaming trends and then the holiday shopping trends. And I've had the opportunity to present this report and this methodology at Brand Innovators for the last, I think, 3 years. I think this is the third year that we've been able to share the Harris Poll data with you. And what we did is, we looked at 3 key things we wanted to help understand for marketers today. The first is understand the current state of streaming trends and behaviors. The second is understand the platforms that are driving that consumer engagement. And the third is really understand what's happening for the holiday shopping season. What you can see on the right is this was not a small survey. We went ahead and did a large oversampling of the United States so we could get all demographics, income groups, geographies, families, multiple children, no children in the household. They really paint a really robust mosaic of what's happening today in holiday shopping. So first, we're going to start with streaming trends. And I think what we've really seen is that the headline from 2020 is, on the streaming face, is that really we are seeing an acceleration of trends that were already underway. And a rapid acceleration. Today, 85% of US households now stream. This cuts across every age group and demographic. We've long known that Gen Z and millennials were majority streamers, but now every single age group that is measured up to those boomers and above, those over 74, are now majority households that stream in the United States. And they're streaming a lot. One of the big things that we saw this year is the significant decrease in live TV viewing and the inverse significant increase we're seeing with those watching streaming. And what that means is that for the first time ever in the Harris Poll survey, the average American now reports they spend more time streaming than they do watching live linear television. Millennials, for example, now spend twice as much time streaming as they do watching live linear television. So the big headline from the streaming front, streaming is now mainstream. It's the way most Americans now consume video content, and it's the way most Americans now consume most of their video content. Diving a little bit deeper, what's driving this acceleration? Clearly, cord cutting is one of the major efforts here. We see an acceleration here, and what we saw in 2020 led the author of the survey at the Harris Poll to state that we're now approaching a time in 2021 where it's likely that a majority of American households will no longer have a traditional pay cable package. We call these cord cutters, I prefer to call them cord burners, and I like that term because these aren't folks who've just passively cut the cord. They're not coming back. We see that 86%, nearly 9 out of 10 who've been surveyed, said they're not coming back. They've cut the cord. They're happy with that engagement in that environment. And really, there are two key trends driving this. The first one's obvious. The second one is far more important to those of us who watch media and are looking for kind of long-term trend lines. Obviously, kitchen table discussions around budget were continued to be a key driver of cord cutting. But number two is the important one to watch. 40% of those who cut the cord said they did it simply because they prefer the streaming experience. This is incredibly powerful. This is that secular shift that we talk about in behaviors where people aren't going to be reverting back once we get into a point in time when COVID's no longer having us at home. They've discovered streaming and they prefer that to be the way in which they engage with video content today. So those are kind of the top line results from the streaming that give you a sense of kind of what streaming is happening today and how people are engaging with streaming. Now we'll dive straight into the holiday shopping trends that we're seeing from shoppers this year. I spent a good chunk of my time in the agency and retail world, and I always would love the month or two before the holidays where all of our clients would say, is Christmas going to happen? Is the holiday shopping season going to happen this year? And we can say, fear not, from this survey and from what we're seeing at the registers, the holiday shopping season is going to happen. It's going to be a robust season this year. We are seeing that about a pretty even split. About a quarter of consumers are going to spend more this holiday season, and about a quarter are going to spend less. Overall, we expect to see holiday shopping increase. And the reason for that is because those who plan to spend more are planning to spend a lot more. And those who are planning to spend less are planning to spend a little bit less. Some fun call outs on the side. The biggest winners this year are pets. Pets are going to see the single largest percentage increase and funds spent for them. I think that's because a lot of us are home and spending a lot more time with our pets, and that we feel they are worthy and deserving of gifts. We also see something that we're calling that self-giving really take off and accelerate. Significant increase in what we're looking and planning to spend on ourselves this holiday season. Some interesting anecdotes as we think about from a marketer perspective on how to reach audiences and who to be targeting. While 7 in 10 holiday shoppers this year plan to spend about the same or more, we really are going to see streamers really over-index. Those who stream are going to spend a lot more this holiday season, almost $250 more per person than those who are non-streamers in the United States. And not a big surprise this year, but this is a trend that's been happening every year, and it's been moving farther and farther back in the calendar. But shopping is happening earlier for many. A third began their shopping in September, including about a little more than a third of parents. Gen X, about 40% began shopping by December. One of the things that's really interesting about this survey, it's the first year where we've had a large enough population of Gen Z, those were 18 to 22, who are adults, surveyed. And what we're seeing is they're really outliers in so many efforts. So as with this question, they're going to start their shopping later. And we'll see other questions down the line where they're going to be spending differently. What this has led to, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is we saw, for example, in November that the elongated holiday season led to an environment where many retailers had, all month was Cyber Month, all month was Black Friday. Deals started populating in November because they realized that consumers are really taking control of kind of when, where, and how they shop and aren't now forcing into kind of a confined 3 or 4 day window. Two really interesting facts that are COVID related and probably just momentarily to this year that we saw, and that is that about a third of consumers are going to buy more gifts for more people this holiday season, simply because they're not going to be able to travel to visit with them. And the second one is a whole new holiday gift giving category that's emerged, and we're seeing a lot of retailers lean into this, and that is gifts that are specifically designed or marketed to make life from working from home or being at home more easy, more enjoyable for either yourself or a gift that you're going to give to a friend and family member. So that's kind of a unique 2020 unique gift giving category. We are seeing TVs become a really big purchase this year. Not a big surprise since the TVs become the window into the outside world for so many people. today, but we're going to see a lot of folks pick up and take home a brand new television this holiday season. Again, this has not changed much in the last couple of years we've done this survey. Gift cards are always number one, but we like to see, the kind of good spread there. We are going to see some significant technology purchases, which I'll share in a minute. And we are seeing about 1 in 4 consumers planning to buy a big ticket purchase. Again, here's where Gen Z stands out, over a much larger number, almost 2x the general population looking to make a big ticket purchase this holiday season. A lot of those big ticket purchases from the Gen Z population are going to be video game consoles. So the number one technology item, of course, video games. If anyone's tried to get an Xbox or PlayStation, can kind of understand probably why they're not available anywhere. But again, seeing some significant increases driven by the kind of every 2 or 3 year cycle that we have of a major new video game console. A couple additional fun statistics that we saw jump out. We've seen online really begin to take a larger share of wallet over the years, but this is a year where it really surged. Where we're going to see, overwhelming majority of consumers say they plan to do not just some holiday shopping, but a majority of their shopping online, including about 80%, 8 out of 10 streamers say they'll do most of their shopping online this holiday season. So again, seeing really online shifting in a big way. Key takeaway for marketers, and boy, this hasn't changed much in the last 2 years, but when we first presented this data a couple of years ago, this was a real eye-opener for many retailers, and they really began to adopt it. And that is, I call this the Amazon effect, and that's the top 2 things that are the determining factors of whether or not someone completes a purchase are cheap or free shipping and fast. So now they want it cheap or free, and they want it quickly. And so, the message for retailers and marketers is if you have a product or a direct-to-consumer brand, you need to share up front before you ever make them get to that cart your shipping deals and arrangements, because that will really determine whether or not they keep surfing and keep looking, or if they move on to another site or platform that meets their expectations. Going local will be important this holiday season. There are 2 real key factors driving this. The first is, COVID lockdowns, people feeling not comfortable going into a large retail store in some cases. But also we're seeing millennials and Gen Z really drive this as a cultural value, that shopping local, supporting the local retail outlet has become something that's important to them culturally for their holiday dollars. It's probably my favorite couple slides I'm going to show you next, and I think the favorite takeaways from this year's survey. And that is how the sales funnel has really evolved in 2020, and evolved in a way that we don't anticipate will revert back anytime soon. First big change we saw is obviously this one is a COVID-related change that may revert at some point when we go back to work, but that is the time of day that people do most of their shopping has changed. Traditionally, we would see heavy shopping in the evening hours after 5 p.m. And now what we're seeing is the quote unquote traditional workday, people are at home in front of their computer. It's freeing up that time to do shopping throughout the entirety of the day. And so we're now seeing that a majority of streamers will do some of their shopping, will do most of their shopping during the workday. Interestingly enough, we also see from Nielsen and other folks that a huge surge in streaming hours are also happening in that exact same window that's traditionally been the workday. So you see the conflicts of those 2 coming together, where a lot of folks are watching streaming content and doing shopping at the same time. And that leads to what is my favorite data point of this year's holiday survey. A year ago, when we did the survey, we were doing brainstorming with the research firm about questions that we kind of wanted to maybe a little bit outside the norm or counterintuitive. And we asked the question last year, have you seen a streaming ad that was so engaging in the past month that it caused you to pause the ad or pause the content that you were watching and go shop for that product? And about 1 in 4 US adults said that last year. This year, that number grew to 43% of US adults, and 2/3 of millennials report that they've paused an ad that they saw during streaming to go research and shop for the product. And what this is highlighting for us is the complete collapse of the traditional sales funnel, where we used to think of television at the top for awareness campaigns and performance campaigns at the bottom that really drove that actual purchase. We're really focused on digital and social platforms. And now what we're seeing with streaming is that you can have all of those really in one platform, where you can have the awareness, you can do the pull through, and all the way through to the sales channel and record that. And I'm going to share one kind of fun example that Walmart has done this holiday season, which I think is very just insightful. They're very innovative in how they think about engaging with consumers, but they really are embracing this own the pause concept, but also this concept of consumers on streaming, really engaging throughout the entirety of that sales funnel. So Walmart did some great ads this holiday season on streaming, and one of the ones, lets you right there click and go deeper with if you're watching on Roku, you press that middle button, that purple button right in the middle of the ad, and find more information about that great 65-inch television. Again, really the collapse of that whole funnel, thinking about the entire life cycle, both awareness and performance for the advertiser. Another one of my favorites is this own the pause concept, where you really can, when you hit that pause, another ad can be delivered to you. In this case, you get an ad with a QR code that can give you a chance to win a Roku television. So thinking differently about that budget and about that whole funnel is really going to be a key learning, I think, that we're seeing from 2020, especially from the holiday season, that we think will continue to play out in 2021. A few last slides, and we'll wrap up and take a couple questions if there's time. One of the things that we like to look at is just kind of how are different subgroups playing out here, and we see that millennials are going to spend a little less than the average. They're a little more conscious this year. Parents are spending more, so kids will get more under the tree this year than they spent last year, which is great. One of my favorite statistics as we continue to see how men and women play out differently. Men continue to be very robust in their spending. They plan to spend a lot more this holiday season, both on themselves and on others. Men plan to spend about 3 times as much on themselves as women do this holiday season. So you begin to see kind of some of the differences that play out amongst our generational groups. The last slide I would leave you with are really our kind of takeaways from this holiday season. And they've really played out in what we're seeing at the register from retailers as well as they report. The first is that consumer shifting differently. They're shopping online. Those trends are not going to revert. We're seeing significant increases in, contactless pickup and those types of things that are really shifting behaviors that will have long legs into 2021. They're streaming. Shoppers are overwhelmingly streamers. 85% of consumers now stream. The majority of them, an awful lot of them, stream advertising supported content. So it's not just Netflix or Disney Plus. It's kind of the whole suite of content. Consumers are planning to shop, so fear not. They're going to be turning out in big numbers, as we're already seeing. Numbers are up, and that plays well, I think, for retailers. One thing we're really proud of at Roku is, we think we represent a great cross-section of the United States as the largest streaming platform in the United States. And we see that our streamers will significantly over-index on shopping this holiday season. And lastly, for marketers, advertising works on streaming. It's working exceptionally well, and it's really leading us to think differently about that entire funnel and how we move budgets from perhaps digital and social into streaming, just as linear budgets are moving into streaming as well. And with that, I'll open for questions if there's time.
Thank you so much, Dallas. Sorry, Isabel, I'm back. That was such a great presentation. I really loved hearing that people are still planning to buy and shop for the holidays, because I'm sure that's a good sign for a lot of reasons. And I'm sure a lot of people, are still trying to get excited in their own way about the holidays. I know we're all kind of going to be celebrating it differently than in the past. I don't think we have time for too many follow-ups. Is there anything you kind of want to add to close out the keynote? Oh, you're on mute, Dallas. I'm sorry. Maybe that might have been our end.
I know. I would just say, if folks are interested, the full report and all the data is on our website at Roku. You can search for it. We'll be happy to provide it. And if you're interested in additional briefings, what's fun about the data is we can cut it any way. So if there's a particular insight you're looking for, we'd be more than happy to share with our brand innovator friends.
Awesome. All right. That's great to know. Really appreciate you sharing and joining us today.
Happy holidays.
Great. Happy holidays. Thanks, Dallas. Great. So really excited. We have one more session of the day. So we're thrilled to be joined by Marcy Rabel, who is the Vice President of Global Media and Marketing Services for Campbell's. And this session will be moderated by Ryan Dietert, who is the CEO of Influential. So welcome to the stage. Hi, Marcy. Welcome to the stage, Marcy and Ryan. Marcy, I think your camera went on and off quickly. But really, really excited to have you both here. Ryan, looks like you're in the office today.
I am. Hey, Isabel. Hey, Marcy. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Great. Well, I'll hand it over to you, Ryan. I'll see you guys at the end.
Thanks, Isabel. Marcy, it's great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm very good. Are you at the home office right now?
I am in the home office of Philadelphia. Yes.
Beautiful decor in the background. I like it. I'm actually at the actual office. I need that commercial grade Wi-Fi so I can make sure and have the proper conversation. So I'm very excited to talk. So today, for those that are listening, I'm extremely excited. Besides the fact that Campbell's is an iconic brand, you have so many examples of amazing integrations and partnerships you've done over the last year that I want to jump through all those stories. So I'll kick it off by first and foremost asking, I think the question of 2020. You guys are the iconic brand in CPG. How were you able to, I guess, what kind of changes did you see post-pandemic? And what was the most challenging part of it? Obviously, it's the $1 trillion question happening right now in the CPG world.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the things clearly that happened, right, was everybody ate at home. So eating at home became this dramatic shift that hadn't been there before. And there were two different ways that has played out. One was the challenge that each of us probably felt, right? It came from every day we used to see the question, what's for dinner, between 4 and 6 p.m. And so clearly that went from it trending every day between 4 and 6 p.m. to now it's not only what's for dinner, but it's what's for breakfast and what's for lunch 7 days a week. And so, and for the next 9 months, so how that dilemma that all of our consumers really felt was an opportunity for us to show up in a utilitarian way, right? How do we help them? What we also saw happening almost on the opposite end of the spectrum was this growing confidence that was happening as people were cooking more and embracing the cooking. But they were looking for information, they were looking for new ideas and new ways to think about it. And what we saw in our results were, our recipes that had more diverse flavors, richer flavors were actually performing better. And when we gave solutions that created new ways to use our products, that actually performed better too. So it gave us this really big spectrum to live within, right? Like that kind of quick, easy way people know us. Then on the opposite side of the spectrum, new and different ways to think about us and the flavor that our products bring. I think the biggest challenge we saw was just the trends, right? And trends always move fast, but what we've seen in this pandemic is moving even faster. And so how do we keep up with the speed of the consumer? Not just where they are today, but where they're going to be.
That's great. So a few months back, we had one of your colleagues, Andres Romero, who jumped over to the Swanson brand, and we were talking about, he mentioned the fact that everyone has now become a stay-at-home chef. And in fact, he was actually talking about how his family is also taking up I'm not sure which role, who took what role up, but it was obviously an important piece of the pandemic. How have you guys encouraged that, I guess, either embraced it or showed that consumption-based content on social and on your content strategy? Has it been, is it partnering with chefs? Is it about just showing like the family unit? What's the ways you guys have been going about it?
Yeah, we've done it in multiple ways. So, I think when you think about it from a social standpoint, for some brands that we've leaned into on our own channels, right, as a way to do it. We've also worked with partners where maybe we didn't have as strong of a base in our own channels, or where we actually thought that could play. I'll give you 3 examples. For Campbell's, we trialed a Cook with Campbell's program late spring, early summer on our own platforms. And it was where we used one of our employees as a host. We used one of our chefs as the one who would bring us the inspiration. We had an agency our agency partnering with us. But we had another employee acting as the creative director. And it was really just a scrappy way to bring content to life, kind of fast and furiously. But it was a way for us to show up differently, see what worked, and have a little fun while we did it. And we've actually used some of those learnings to apply to our content in other areas. You called out our partnerships. We worked with a lot of different partners to bring content to life. We did it in different ways too. How Condensed showed up, very different than how showed up. And what we're really trying to do there is, how do we lean into trends? How do we show up in trends? How do we show up in different places? And it's always great to get a chef to say that a can of soup brings richness to the recipe, richness of flavor to the recipe, as well as the ease of preparation. And I think last but not least, influencers, right? So in our Well Yes campaign, we've got Mindy Kaling, who's clearly, a certain scale of influencer, but we chose her because she is just inherently the brand, and we felt that she was such a fit for the brand. But we're also nutritionists, to kind of bring that credibility. We've got another group of influencers who we did a program called Sip and Scroll to really showcase the ability of the sippable, packaging. And so it's really how do you think about where you are with the brand, where your consumer is, and find unique and creative ways to bring the message to life. And partnerships and social have been a big part of that.
I love that. And actually, kind of follow-up question on that is, when you had those chefs go live and even the influencers, or sorry, when they went out with their content, was it live content? Was it them like cooking in real time and people? Is it Instagram live, or do you guys do more of like pre-made content?
We did both. So we did do some live. We did Amazon Live. So we did do some live programming, and then also, also the pre-taped, so that we could make sure that editing was on point. When we did the Cook with Camels program, we actually chose to do it ahead of time, just so that we could, think any bugs if it's our first time doing it. It's always the pick, right? Knowing how to balance things so you're keeping it interesting and showing up in new ways.
Amazing. Well, I mean, we have to dive into Mindy Kaling. I mean, that must have been like the most fun thing ever. She is hilarious. I've watched The Office like at least 10 times all the way through, and she's one of the best writers. Why her? And then what was the actual content like that she was making?
Yeah, I would tell you that my nieces and nephews are all huge fans of The Office also, and so they now think that I'm like, I've got street cred now because she's in some of our spots. I think when we looked at Well Yes and just the tagline, bright, right? And so for us, it's about thinking bright and eating bright and living bright. And when we thought of Mindy Kaling, that's just Mindy, right? And so she was so just core to what we think of as brand, that it was just a natural fit, and we were really happy that she, loved the product and could partner with us. It's great when you don't have to worry about somebody the messaging, because she just is. And I think that was the great thing, was that understanding of the brand made that choice really easy. And so the message has a lot of it is video, right? So just that brand message, but she's also, media tours with media, as well as posting some on her social channels. And so it's been really fun to see it come to life.
I love it. I mean, that's a great partnership, another great partnership. And so we're both actually partners with the NFL. And I'd love to hear, because to me, it's so interesting. Obviously, the sports in 2020 has been this crazy roller coaster ride. And even when football, which had the longest timeline to kick off, still has been happening there, every week. I'm a fantasy football player, so every week something is changing with people not being able to play and moving games around. We had a Wednesday game a few weeks back.
Yeah.
So was Chunky and Madden 21 in the early parts of the year? Is that an ongoing thing? What was that all about?
Yeah, I mean, clearly a lot of didn't know what was going to happen in the football season. So there was a lot of scenario planning, just like the NFL was planning scenarios, so were we with our brands. We've done partnerships outside of NFL previously. And so we started talking about Madden early on, just because they were doing a new release, which we thought would be a great place for Chunky to be. We know our audience, part of our audience is gamer, and gamers are athletes too. And so how do we make sure that they get that filled up with Chunky as well? And so that partnership really started from a media idea, but we've expanded it out. So we integrated into the yard and brought it to life with the championship, and are now doing a meal challenge to really bring the community aspect to the partnership. It's just a great way to keep evolving, learning, and making it better.
And I'd be remiss not to ask, because I mean, there's so many. We talk about social seems people think of like Instagram and Facebook. I mean, TikTok. There's Twitch. There's all different. I mean, is that a big focus now into next year? Is gaming and Twitch? Is that a platform you guys want to be on, or you're on currently?
Yeah, I mean, some of our brands are active on Twitch. We have done, Chunky was active last year, so it isn't a starting point for us. So we've been there previously. We actually did a custom content piece with Twitch last year. We brought the Mama's Book campaign to life using using a Twitch player and his mother. So I think we see that platform as viable. I think it's interesting when you look at just what's happening with media, right? A lot of platforms are aging down because they might have been older and they're aging down. Twitch is actually the opposite and aging up. We're also seeing the other channels across Twitch, right behind the gaming piece, really come to life, cooking and their lifestyle places. So I think for us, it's again keeping the pulse on our consumer and where are they making? How do we fit in? Can our brand fit in? Into that space.
And so IP wise, I'm 37. I'm on the edge of millennial, right before the edge. And I remember I grew up with Conan and Family Guy. But it could also age down because Conan, there's so much like. So what is Prego? Is that you guys going after basically like 25 to 40 men and women? I guess what made you go? Why'd you guys go Prego and Conan and Family Guy?
Yeah, I mean, we did the Conan integration. Well, it was supposed to be in early July, and then just based on what was happening in the world, it ended up kind of moving around a little bit to later. I think what we saw happening was great increasing, right? So late night and Conan really being a beneficiary of that rise in audience. And we looked at Prego as a brand and just how King Coco brings messaging to life. We just thought it was a great way to put Prego front and center and bring that brand to life. So it's just a natural. The audience was there. Prego. If you look at just what trends are trending all the time, so it was just a great place for us to be in. And I think Conan did a great job with that and bringing it to life.
Yeah, it's hilarious content for sure. And so we have this great brand alignment with great talent. Now, I love integrations with technology, and obviously Instacart blew up this year, as you imagine. Why them versus anyone else? And is that something where you guys are planning on continuing this over into the future?
Yeah, and I think your point about technology is really key. So I'll talk about technology. Shopping. The whole complex took off. E-commerce has taken off. For a little, one of the later categories on that rise, but COVID is a turning point for it. And Instacart has been a great partner for us. And when we were thinking about bringing a Thanksgiving program to life, Instacart was just a natural fit for us with that. And so working with them, doing some first to market elements with that program, sending emails, and really building it as much more than just insert your ad here, but how do we layer them in and do something a little deeper and bring an idea called dinner insurance to life with it, which is great. But I think the key part is that technology, right? Like how do we really make sure we know what's happening with technology? How do we use that in a way that helps to bring our message to life? So, yes, we had Mindy and influencers going. We partnered Key to understand when people are sitting for a long period of time. And so knowing that we have the sippable packaging, encouraging people to get up and move, because we're all sitting in front of computers, many hours during the day, so people to get up and move and take their soup with them while they do it.
That's great.
Hence the sip and stroll idea.
I like it. You mentioned also about I think we were talking about this last week about Thanksgiving, and you guys even launched, I think, around that kind of idea of the insurance piece, the Thanksgiving insurance, and the fact that you guys actually launched these social polls and found ways to take share of voice in a very difficult time, and everyone's going after the same people. I love it if you talk about that a little bit. And for those that are listening, when you are in the highest end of the CPG wars with other major players, it's always interesting to see the adaptation and agility that people have.
Yeah. So for dinner insurance, I think it was a planned program. We had time to go around the shopping cycle, close into the holiday. And how do we bring that to life? 10 days before we were supposed to go live, Whole Foods launched their program with Progressive Insurance all around the turkey. And so I think in normal instances, you look at it and you're just like, God, right? Like we had this whole plan and somebody else is done first. What do we do? And what we decided to do was like, let's jump into the conversation. So we pivoted our launch date, pulled it up. We launched 3 days after Whole Foods went live with our dinner insurance program, which is all about the sides, right? And we thought it created a natural conversation around Thanksgiving. And is it the turkey or is it the side? And so we used Instagram polls to really help get people into that conversation. Hopefully people were looking for a little lightness at that time, and really, bring the sides into the conversation. It gets a lot of talk.
That's great. And kind of the theme of agility, we talked last time about, you have to describe it because I won't do it justice. So basically you had to find some food stylists at the beginning of COVID, and I think you had a unique triumvirate of people come together to solve your problems.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we learned during this whole COVID time period is best laid plans, right? Like never end up playing out. And for what you're referencing is for production. I think the first thing that happens, is okay, everything's on lockdown. You're not going to be able to shoot, but the work doesn't stop, right? Especially when you saw what was happening with food and grocery, with click and collect and people, finding alternative ways to get their food. And so we needed to make sure that we were showing up and showing up in the right ways, but you can't go out and do a photo shoot. And so my team took a different tact, and they said, okay, let's find resources that we actually can tap into. And so my lead on the content creation team found a food stylist first in Philadelphia, our market. So it's like a food stylist in the home market whose husband happened to be a photographer. And I may get this wrong also. But as we were working through that, what we also discovered was that her ex-husband was a producer. And so we could actually bring all 3 of them together because they were all family. And so from a safety perspective, they were safe. We just had all the COVID protocols. But in our backyard, we could actually tap into 3 local talents that could help us bring it to life. We shot a ton of good things, and we're able to bring new images and new messages to life using very unexpected talent in the Philadelphia market.
I imagine there's some really good outtakes that weren't used about, referencing their old marriages, but that's very good. I mean, ultimately, we're all trying to get the job done. So well played and fun.
Bringing families together.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. You've already, we're both in the IRI advisory boards. I know you guys have been doing influencers for a while now, and it's obviously you guys are a beacon for what you should be doing going forward into 2020 decade. I guess, how do you think of the media mix? Is it, I would imagine that it's TV has shrunk, digital and streaming has increased, and social. Is that, do you guys believe in the idea that it is kind of hitting the same people over and over again? Is it about hitting different mediums? Like, how do you guys think about social and the overall marketing mix?
Yeah, first we think about it by format first. So that's one of the first places that we start. So we start, is video going to be the format of choice, or what's our first way in? And so really thinking about that. How are we going to bring our message to life, or what we should be the best format to bring our message to life? Certainly video now crosses like everything, right? So we think about that first and foremost, which breaks down the walls of traditional media channels, right? TV versus social versus whatever. So thinking that way is one of the first places that we start. And then it's, okay, you then layer in the KPIs. What are the KPIs that you're going after? How do you bring that to life? When we think about our mix, we really do, we don't have here's the set way that we do it, and you start here and you go down from that. Look at, I think as most people do today, what's our audience? What's our KPI that we're going after, and then building out the program for that. So how we go to market looks V8 red, right? The traditional tomato looks very different than how we go into like V8 energy, which looks very different than how we go to like with Prego. And so it's really making sure that we optimize the mix. And even if you do have the same channels that your media channels that you're turning on, how we bring it to life, right? Like Conan and Prego would not have worked, for most of our other brands. And so it's really making sure you're grounded in that brand foundation, and then you build it from there.
And it's kind of a philosophical question, because social has become so ubiquitous that our grandparents, our parents are on these platforms, not obviously as much as younger generation. Now, I think of TV as more top of funnel, and sometimes you can say something for social as well. But I mean, ultimately, you can hit people that are Gen Z to early millennial on TV, just so you can hit like through the iHeart Music Festival Awards or something, as well as you get on social. So are you looking first and foremost at the audience of the brand that you want to go after? Is that number one? The audience base?
Correct.
First? Got it.
The audience, the audience. And a lot of times that's defined, even in today's world, it starts to be defined less by age and more by mindset, right? And so really thinking about how you're defining that audience that you're going after. And I think when you think about like upper, mid, and lower funnel, media is clearly my background, my starting point. And so I always think any channel can be used in any part of the funnel. Some channels are better at certain parts than others. And so you have to start with the audience and where are they? How do you fit your messaging in? And then how do you layer it, right, to make sure that you're bringing it full circle for them, but doing it in a way that hopefully they lean into it versus, turning off.
Well, I love it. So yeah, let's talk about the maybe the middle and lower funnel and in the social world. When you guys are looking at the efficacy of your campaigns, would you say most or top of funnel you do is a lot about sales lift? Is it all about brand lift? Is it about sentiment? I guess how do you guys look at it? And I imagine maybe it's brand by brand difference potentially.
Yeah. My first answer would be yes to all of the above. I think because data is so prevalent in today's world, I think we try to look at both that, front end metrics as well as the metrics that will come in later. Do you know correlations or causality between your front end metrics and what you have later with sales lift and brand lift? So how does it all work together with one? Getting really clear on what our primary KPI is. So when you're starting, right, you can want to do a lot, but you've got to get down to, at the end of the day, what's the one thing that matters? So getting really clear on what that is. Is that short term or is that long term? Is that sales lift or is that brand lift? You're always looking at both. So we always want to have a good lens on both, because if one is lift, if your short term sales is your primary KPI and the brand lift, you want to know what's happening, because if I can get short term sales and brand lift, that's like the holy grail. So you want to look at both to know if I can find something that's doing that, that's where I'll lean in, versus one that's just lifting sales. I think the thing that we're trying to do with IRIs and Nielsen's and everyone in the world is, how do we get that data? How do we get better data faster? Because the faster we can optimize, the better it will be, and the better user experience we'll have with our consumers. And so, just trying not to be overwhelmed by the data, use it for good.
I love that. It's a great segue into, so we're both with IRI, and we've done probably about 3+ years, maybe 4 years at this point, worth of sales lift studies across a number of brands, and they're great. They're match market tests that shows test and control methodology. It's a great indicator of of the efficacy of influencers. The biggest issue, for at least for what we've had in the past from the brands, is it would take 6 to 8 weeks to run it. It would take another 4 to 6 weeks to get the results back, and then by then you're basically into other half of the year. We actually launched with IRI's partner Upfront early this year. We actually tested it back in 2019, but launched it this year. It was actually really, considering the pandemic happened, it was a very kind of, it worked out well in terms of the need state of a lot of our brands, was how do we get decision back really quickly, especially in a situation where lift studies are very hard when there's no baselines. And what we were able to see is that on a weekly basis, through what is essentially called for those that are listening, that are in the CPG world, it's called the campaign conversion feed, and the ability to actually see from a week-to-week basis retailer information on loyalty card swipes or phone number type-ins. I love that your thoughts on this is that what we saw on our side from a lot of our brands, and they've continued to turn on and keep it on all year long, is in between those, every 8 to 12 weeks of those lift studies, on a week-to-week basis, seeing which influencer, which content, and which media audience is driving the most amount of people to walk into a store. And you can see that the signals are pretty robust. We might see like 40, 50,000 signals in the course of a campaign. and one influencer and one piece of content drives 3x more people driving and making a purchase. Those are kind of the insights that we've seen that can marry that kind of short term and long term into one kind of overall strategy.
Totally. And I think it changes the perception that people have of influencers, where they might have thought that it was just about like engagements and longer term. And it's like, no, there's a power, right? There's a power that they can actually deliver in sending people into the store to the shelf, right? And so that's where I think partnering with IRI to get that data faster so that you don't have to wait, 6 weeks of not learning is a really long time. I know it's dependent on MMX, it's even longer than that, so 6 weeks is fast. But when you're trying to optimize and get better, I think that is where that quick turn, that week by week view is really important. The other thing that it is, because I think a lot of people felt like, oh, you're going to just be leaning into fewer and fewer, like influencers in this instance, like you're just leaning into fewer and fewer because you're only optimizing into who's working. And how we've tried to think about it is, yes, you are going to optimize if some aren't working or some are working better, but what it also allows you to do is improve the content on everyone. Right? So you can really also start just using it to step change the performance of everyone when you've got that data early.
100%. I mean, whether it's a few things on the content side, is it more video based? Is it more static based? Is it product focused? Is it more consumption based? And then the lookalike influencers. That's part of the fun is what types of influencers are performing best. Because really, most of all the stuff that's really cool in terms of measurement is boosting through whitelisting. It's the amplification of a piece of content from an influencer, and then be able to find out what is the likeness that is driving the most amount of X. Or conversion against a certain demographic. So I love that you're thinking that way, and I think most CPG companies these days are saying, well, how do I make the better decisions on the fly? Because every single week something else happens. We were all going through it from March till about August. Every week, some sort of natural disaster or social injustice thing was happening for us, and more than ever, I think if we can able to make better decisions, I think we're all going to be better for it.
Yeah, and you can feel more confident in the decisions that you're making because it's grounded in data. I think the other thing that we're also really thinking about is how do you then share across teams, right? So if you're learning this with your influencer program or with your social program, how do you then share that with other teams that might not get the data as fast, which then helps make every team smarter. And I think that creates greater connectivity, and then everybody moves forward versus different teams moving at different rates.
I love that. And one of my questions was going to be, in a massive organization like Campbell's, how are you guys intercommunicating so well? And when rapid innovation happens, both on the marketing side and also on the product side, there must be someone that's their entire job is to try to keep the lines of communications open.
No, I think that's we have to do it, that it's all of our jobs, and I think the key thing, right, is everybody knows who to connect with. We started doing this, my team started doing a Monday and Thursday stand-up meeting. So they meet, and it's like, speed dating for connectivity. So every team goes around and just says what's hot so that you can start making connection points, and then whoever needs to talk after can go from there. And also with their agencies, right? How do we create that connectivity across from their standpoint too? Getting, I think that's building a skill that hopefully we'll take into the future, where we're all just better at holding hands and running versus everyone has to sit on top of each other.
Got it. Before we we're almost about to get to the question section of this. We talk a lot about business here and about first to market things here. I would just love to know, what are you excited about for 2021, personally and professionally? Is it getting out? Obviously the vaccine could help a lot tremendously, but what are you thinking about for the next year to keep you motivated to see hopefully a brighter future?
Yeah. I think for work, I think what always gets me going is transformation. And that, so not only the transformation that my team is doing, right, and how we work, but when you see the transformation being driven by the consumer, right, it's what keeps us on the top of our game. We don't get bored. So continuing to see that transformation, how do we set up, first to market beta so that we're learning as we go? We work off of a learning agenda. So how do we keep leaning into that and and getting smarter as we go. I think that's what's most exciting to me, is that the world is just moving so much faster, which forces us to move faster, which I love, and really builds that fast twitch muscle. So that's what really gets me going about the going forward. I think what I'm most excited about personally is there's so much content out there right now. It is, just that discovery, either myself or, friends' recommendations, really discovering great content, and, using that to help inspire me to think about how to reach the bar.
That's great. Well, inspiring words. That's the forward-thinking nature of you and your company. I'm going to jump into the chat here, and let me see right here. So we got a few good questions here. Let's go. I love these. So someone says, I love the Save the Snow Day pledge. How are you driving participation, and what are the plans for that segment of pledgers?
What plans for that one?
For that segment of pledgers, I guess for the people that are pledging.
Yeah, got it. Well, thank you. We love the Save the Snow Day too. And I think there's a snowstorm coming up this week, so we're excited to see it come.
Yeah, I heard that.
So Save the Snow Day, for those of you who don't know, is a program that we're doing for Campbell's. It started actually off of a conversation that started back in September, October, where schools started announcing that they were no longer going to have snow days because they could work remotely. And so it was a conversation we started, and just where Campbell's lives and that space, we thought it was a natural conversation for us to be involved in. So we started a pledge. So we have there was gift box, or we sent boxes with Save the Snow Day gear out to the first pledgers. So we will hopefully be doing some more of that to get more pledging, and then we'll be tracking snow across the country so that we can see winning. So there'll be more things unfolding as we go into the snowiest month, which is January, and building from there. Keep going on and checking out.
Very cool. Another great question, which is actually, I'm curious myself. What percentage of creative is done in-house? Are you guys more partner-led? You guys do a lot of things in-house? What are you guys thinking?
We are more partner-led at this time. So we really have a great small partner at our side. So we're think about partners, agency partners, and our media partners. So how do we think about that? I think the starting point is always, how much work should be done by us versus where do we need partners to help us bring that to life? And when we're talking about partners, is that a media partner, or is that an individual, like an influencer? And how do we think about that mix of activation? And that's going to vary based on what we're trying to do.
Beautiful. And we have someone that is looking forward to 2021 right here. They're asking, can you give any insight into Campbell's initiatives for 2021? What brands are you most excited about for next year?
So we are on a fiscal that is the tomato season. So half of 2021 is still our current year. So a lot of the brands that are active now will still be active for the first 6 months. So that's a mix of brands across our snacking business and our meals and beverage business. So things like Goldfish and Kettle and Cape through snacking, among others, late July. And then on the meal side, clearly Campbell's Soup and Gage, Prego and Pace, Pacific Broth, Pacific Foods, which is another one of our brands. So we have a lot of brands active. As we go into next year, we'll probably see a lot of them back again. We have different objectives that we have against each of them. But, that you'll probably see a lot of them active.
That's great. And it's actually dovetails one of the questions here is user-generated content, UGC, an important part of your brand strategy? And I imagine all of the launches these days now is how do I get people to respond and create their own content? So is UGC the next bastion of 2021 is to create as much TikTok content or people that create that kind of homegrown made content that kind of permeates across the internet?
Yeah, I think UGC content is clearly always going to be part of the consideration, right? Because you want to build that brand, not only brand love, but brand advocacy. right? I think it's for how we like to think about it, is living in culture, and but living in culture credibly, right? And so I think it is back to the brand and, you know, what does the brand stand for? How do we make sure that is clear? And then hopefully bring bring others along to want to talk about it as well. And so we monitor it, we look at it, we track it, and, you know, UGC will be a part of that. It's how do we do it in a way that, how do we do it, but how do we think about that and what part of the mix do we want that to be? Some brands like spaghetti, right, clearly much more naturally in that space. So there's to live more in that space.
And the question, the burning question is, can we follow you on TikTok? Are there any dances we should know about?
I am not. I am a voyeur on TikTok, I would say.
Nice. And same with the brands. Have you guys leaned in yet? Or is that more of a 2021 project?
Yeah, TikTok we've been monitoring really closely because it's great to see, you know, recipes and food trending there. We love seeing that, so we're following it closely. We have not had brands active on it, but keep watching. You probably will soon.
Very cool. Isabel, you coming in to go tell us we're out of time?
If you have one more question, that's fine. We're getting close.
Yeah, what else we got here? I guess, yeah, I think we hit most of the main questions. I guess the biggest question I have is, you know, Marcy, now you've been with Campbell's, you know, for a long time. Is this something where you think that the brand constantly has to reinvent itself? Is that the ethos of the brand to innovate at all times? How do you guys stay at the top of the game when you guys have basically been around forever?
Yeah, I mean, I have this funny story. When I joined Campbell, I was in a cab, and the cab driver asked me, you know, who do you work for? And I said, oh, I work for Campbell's. And he just took his hands off the wheel and went, I love Campbell's soup. And if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you will see or guess that I have not ever had that reaction from other brands. So I was like, very much like, oh my God, it's like the best to hear. I think for us it is, you know, I think brands are iconic. A lot of our brands are iconic. They're very well known. So I think what we think about is not the reinvention, but how do you keep them relevant? Right? They're such amazing brands. But you know, times change, people change. So how do you keep making sure that we're staying relevant, that we know what's going on, you know, with cooking and eating across different audience segments, and that we can really show up in ways that are true to our brands, but you know, spot on with what's happening in the market. And so that's the challenge for us, is setting all of these brands up for the next 100 years.
Sage advice. Thank you for your time. You're very busy. Appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
And Marcy, I have to add one thing. I loved hearing about the Save the Snow Day initiative because our chief content officer, his name is David Teicher, became an inadvertent Snow Day activist on Twitter. He actually went viral talking about his children's district decided to keep snow days, and he's been now advocating for snow days. So it's great to hear that you guys are doing that too.
That is awesome. I'll have to start following him.
Yeah, definitely check him out on Twitter. You'll see posts about it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you both so much. Really great to hear from you, Marcy, and great to always have you, Ryan. And thank you both for closing out an amazing day on the future of media. You know, we were joined by so many great speakers today. I mean, I took so much from all of these sessions, whether it be from holiday shopping or saving the snow days. So we hope that you will join Brand Innovators tomorrow. We just have 2 live casts left this year. So tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, we'll be going live with a summit on CPG marketing. Where we'll be joined by leaders in the industry from Molson Coors, Ferrero, Anheuser-Busch, Milk Bar, and many more. So thank you all for joining, and hope